Going live, going live, going live. Okay, so obviously yesterday we had the NHL second to seventh round draft. We've had the NHL draft this weekend. No real surprises for me, really, where the top two went. Although I think Kakko is the better player at this point. I think he's more NHL ready than Jack Hughes, and the big debate is, is Jack Hughes going to be the better player overall, and is he going to have the higher ceiling and all that? But what we saw on day two of the draft was the trades happening. So PK Subban going to the Devils. I think Nashville were forced to make a move there because of the reduced salary cap. Patrick Marleau going to the Canes, Carolina. That's going to be interesting. More trades will happen as teams have to readjust to the reduced salary cap with RFAs and UFAs getting ready to be signed. I think there's going to be a lot of movement this summer in the NHL player market. I really do. Women's World Cup, VAR is dominating more than the football. And I think what we've seen is where last year was actually really good with the experiment with VAR. This year has not been as good. I think the rule variations they brought in, the new experimental laws or rules or whatever you want to call them, the new interpretations of certain things. It's the penalty encroachment. That's been a big talking point. So they've dropped that for the penalty shootouts, but you have it in the group games and you have it in regulation time. So that's a complete mockery of a rule. Interference with offside, handball. The whole thing is the interpretation of rules is a mess. And I'm going through all the matches that I've covered so far, that I've watched, and VAR comes up in a hell of a lot of games. It's dominating the debate with the use of it. I mean, are FIFA getting the use of VAR correct? Are FIFA implementing it correctly? Are the referees allowed to use their skills, or are they relying too much on it? I think the referees are hoping VAR will get them out of a mess if they make an incorrect decision. They are relying on it more than they should. The rules that they've changed have made the game worse. The length of time VAR takes to review a decision has made the game worse. And I find it really interesting that they're choosing the Women's World Cup to experiment with these law changes and not the men's tournament last year. I think they're trying to get these law changes in. It's making a mockery of the sport. The criticisms are there. While I agree that having a reviewable, video official like other sports should be there, other sports have implemented their third officials, their video officials, with far greater ease. And football, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what FIFA are doing with this, but it's an embarrassment, and it's detracting from what's been a really decent quality tournament, really, for where the women's game is at. And FIFA have got the implementation of the new rules and VAR all wrong. The good growth that we had last year with the use of VAR and the actual steps they put in place to make it a successful system and a working system have been thrown away by this World Cup, and it is making a mockery of the sport. Obviously today England play Cameroon in their first knockout game, in the first knockout game of the day. Hopefully it doesn't get decided by VAR. Hopefully it doesn't get decided by a penalty shootout where VAR will have a different interpretation of the encroachment rule. Because if that happens, then it makes a mockery out of the sport. Because we saw two games yesterday where VAR made a mockery. We've had 3 retaken penalties because of VAR in the group stages. And it's becoming the big talking point rather than the quality level of the players improving in the women's game and the crowds, growing in the women's game. VAR has become the talking point. Another note, Israel Folau has decided to open a crowdfunding campaign for his legal challenge against Rugby Australia. That is not gone down well on social media with a lot of people. So the Israel Folau saga continues. And it's not going away, and it's in the build-up to this World Cup, and the Israel Folau issues with Rugby Australia continue, and that's clearly got to be a distraction for the rest of the players, because other Australian players have weighed in, such as Drew Mitchell, who've basically given their 2 cents to the conversation. And that kind of environment is not conducive to a successful team. I think Australia could struggle going forward, and I think Super Rugby, as it currently stands, is in trouble going forward, because if the rumours are true about the Melbourne Rebels being in trouble, much like Western Force, it's not a great go forward. Really, it's kind of worrying that teams in Super Rugby are struggling financially. Federations, unions are struggling financially, and Israel Folau is now doing what he's doing. And yeah, the crowdfunding. I mean, the guy's already minted; he can pay for his own legal costs, surely. So the Israel Folau thing is dominating the rugby news at the moment, more so than training camps for squads and warm up games coming up. The Israel Folau Rugby Australia saga rumbles on. I'll do a video on that, but he's launched a crowdfunding campaign, and I think that just shows the character of the man. It's all about greed. It's all about money. It's got nothing to do with anything else. Whoever is advising Israel Folau is an idiot. People are. It's a controversial topic, but it's definitely going to be unsettling for the Australian Wallabies going into the World Cup. That's got to be clearly a distraction for the players that are selected that do go and play, because that's I don't know how to describe it, but it's a mess that is Rugby Australia's making. I think we have to go back in time to look at how badly run Rugby Australia is, but Israel Folau is just the end product of a badly run organisation. That's my personal opinion on that. Rugby Union in Australia is in deep, deep trouble. And I've spoken about the issues with Rugby Australia for a long time on this channel, and I've got a lot of friends who are rugby fans, and the conversation is quite a bit of the time about the issues that the game in the Southern Hemisphere and the game professionally around the world faces with financial issues, and professionalism hasn't necessarily had the positive impacts it should have had when it was brought in 25 years ago. There are a lot of issues with professionalism in the modern era, and Israel Folau is a product of the issues of professionalism, the greed. We have this debate in football on a daily basis with, are the players paid too much? Are they asking for too much money? And now we're seeing that in rugby union. And it's going to come to a point where it's not sustainable for the sport, and the sport is going to struggle. And if Israel Folau does win his court case against Rugby Australia, rugby union in Australia is pretty much dead in the water. It'll need a new union reformed, possibly, and it will need a complete restructuring that will cost even more money. And it leaves the state of the sport at grassroots level in doubt. And it's a whole toxic atmosphere, but professionalism hasn't quite worked in the way that it was anticipated to work all those years ago, back in 1995. Something's gone a bit wrong with rugby union, but you have to look at football to see where professionalism's gone wrong there. The wages are out of control, the transfer fees are out of control, ticket price is too high, the TV deal is not fairly distributed around the leagues, around the world. Clubs are overstretching themselves to pay the wage demands of the players, and fans are disgruntled and feel that it's out of control a little bit. Lack of a salary cap, there you go. But a salary cap would tend to go against EU regulation in the European League, so we'll see how that works. Obviously, we've got the rep round in Australia, so all the internationals are taking place. There's no NRL this weekend, which I think is about right where the rep round should be. I think it's a pity that City Country Origin's gone, and State of Origin is spread over 7 weeks now, rather than just 3 games over a 3-week period. I think that would be a far better way to solve State of Origin, is to have the two sets of teams, the New South Wales Blues, the Queensland Maroons, in camp for a 3-4 week period, play all the games in that period, and have that kind of mid-season break for the NRL where they actually play state of origin and rep games for the internationals in that period. It's done, and then they go back to regular season play. That's my idea on it, but obviously the NRL wants to do it like that. Is what it is. Andy Murray has got through to a Queen's final in the doubles. He wasn't expecting to do that. Obviously, he had his hip surgery. He's had to have his hip basically restructured. He aims to be back later in the year in singles action, so he could play doubles at Wimbledon. So it's going to be interesting to see how Andy Murray does over the summer. If he wins Queen's in the doubles, that could be a sign that he's going to play doubles more than singles. He might actually become a doubles player. It's not unheard of. His brother's a good doubles player, so it's not unheard of that Andy Murray might, get involved in the doubles game in tennis. Be pretty good. But back to the Women's World Cup. I mean, the VAR. I mean, I'm going to be watching both games today. And so hopefully VAR doesn't dominate the headlines tomorrow morning, because if it does, then the World Cup could go and be known for not the fact that the quality of the women's game has improved and the skill level has improved, but for the video officials. We have to look at other sports, though, and some of the issues they've had with video referees and how quickly they fine-tuned the system and how quickly it worked. Rugby league and rugby union, the NHL, they've got issues, but they are improving it. Season on season, they look at each season, what was the good, what was the bad. Cricket with the third umpire, they have massively every year, at the end of every season, they regularly review how it's gone. They regularly tweak things, but they seem to implement their video officials far better than football. And FIFA is the richest, is the governing body of the richest sport in the world. And sports with less money in them are implementing the video official far better, and with far greater ease, and with a set in stone remit of what that video official is looking for. Football just can't get it right. And it sort of got it right last year with the World Cup. It got the basic principle of VAR correct. It did. Why in the women's game are they getting it wrong, where in the men's game they got it right? I do not know. But this VAR kind of stuff is going to affect the Euros next year. It's going to affect the Champions League, the Europa League. It's not just the Women's World Cup that's being screwed up by this. It will affect the big men's tournaments next year. The Olympics, it'll be used for the men's Olympics as well as the women's Olympics football competitions. It's going to be used in, and as I said in previous videos, it's going to be affecting football results and matches for years to come. It's going to be affecting how the officials on the field respond to decisions they've got to make. If they are becoming too reliant on the safety blanket that is VAR to dig them out of a hole, it's going to damage the game massively. And FIFA have got the implementation completely wrong. I'm just looking through my notes, and what was it? The Sweden USA game, 2 VAR checks for both goals, wasting time after the goals were scored. There was a review in the Netherlands-Canada game in the first minute. That took 3 minutes for the penalty that wasn't given, which should have been given as a penalty. So that's 2 big games. The Scotland-Argentina game is the big farce. At the end of that 3-3 draw. Italy-Brazil, there was a VAR penalty check there for the penalty. South Africa, Germany. I mean, I'm going through it. I'm finding VAR check after VAR check after VAR check. I mean, there's all sorts in it. USA, Chile. There's VAR review in that. England, Argentina. VAR review in that. I think there was a couple in that one. Italy, Jamaica. There was a load of VAR reviews in that. There's tons here. Australia, Brazil was the VAR frenzy in my eyes, because there was 1, 2, I think it was 4 or 5 VAR reviews in the Australia, Brazil game. Nigeria, Sakura, no. Some crap there, not interested in that. There was Italy, Australia. There was a lot of VAR in that as well. Brazil, Jamaica. I think so. England, Scotland. There was a VAR review. Yeah, is controversial in that one. No, nothing there. And yeah, so almost every game in the Women's World Cup that I've watched, there's been at least one VAR review. The amount of time wasted as well. It's not just that the decisions they're getting are controversial to be reviewed. It's the amount of time. There was one of them in there that took 3.5 minutes for a simple "that is a penalty, move on," and they gave the wrong decision. So you got to look at the remit and all sorts. But it is what it is. I mean, we're not. It's got to be got right soon, because if they get it wrong going into the Champions League and Europa League and the domestic leagues as well are saying what they're going to be reviewing as well. They're cherry picking the bits that they want to use out of a VAR system going forward when it comes to Euro 2020 and the Olympics and Champions League final, Europa League final. And the men's game has that kind of controversy. That kind of controversy in the men's game. You think of the press reaction. Think of the. But seriously though, you can say congratulations to Norway. I watched the Norwegian goal and I fell asleep. I was meant to try and stay awake and review it, and I fell asleep because I've spent 2 days doing my mate's garden for him. So I've been actually working outdoors to come of a game rather than the two sides, the better side winning. They are having an impact on games. Teams have been knocked out because of it now. If this was to happen in the men's form of the game, the media outcry would be such, and the fan reaction would be such that FIFA would have to scrap it. Quite literally. We're not looking at it's harsh. The video ref cost us the TMO. It's because the implementation has been so haphazard with this system. And they're trialing it in major tournaments rather than in pre-season friendlies or friendly internationals or a minor international tournament. This is on the world's biggest stage for the sport. Yes, it's the Women's World Cup, so it is a lesser tournament than the Men's World Cup. I'm not going to try and compare the two sports, the two men's and women's games, because that's flawed. But it's detracting away from the fact that the quality of the women's game has massively improved on 4 years ago. Some of the stadiums are pretty full. Crowds are up. Viewership on TV is up. Participation in the last 4 years is up as far as I can ascertain. If they trialled the current rules and the current VAR as it is last year in the Men's World Cup, and let's say these encroachment rules and the interpretation of offside and the interpretation of handball, and they did that in Russia last year, my God, the media outcry, the fan outcry, the protests, the negativity around it, VAR will be dropped completely. And while I do agree that it has to be there, they've got to get the remit right, which they're not. They have not got the remit of how it's got to be used. Referees are deliberately not making decisions because the VAR will make it for them. So they're not using their intuition and going with their gut instinct. They're oohing and ahhing about decisions. They're not quite giving them when they should or shouldn't. And the lines judges, they're not putting up the flag for offside. I let VAR do it. Go with your instincts. And if you are wrong, it's overturned. And if you are right, the VAR will say you're right. So referees are less inclined to do their job properly. And the VAR is still, even itself, what is offside? What is interfering with play? Because there's been a few goals, including Australia, benefiting from that. What's the point of having that the linesman or lineswoman in this case, if they're not going to wave for that's offside, there's a foul there. Let the VAR do it. They're becoming cautious and over reliant on the tech. This is the danger that was there. FIFA haven't thought through some of these rule changes, especially the encroachment of the penalty. I mean, they're not stopping the players running into the box, but they're pinging the goalkeeper for going 4 or 5 inches off the line. How is a goalkeeper meant to save a penalty then? They might as well just walk out the goal. But they're not enforcing it for the penalty shootout. So if England and Cameroon was to go to penalties tonight, much like Norway, Australia last night, they're not going to enforce the goalkeeper encroachment. What's the point of having the rule then if you're not going to enforce it? FIFA are already reacting to a bad situation. Instead of being proactive, they're being reactive. And I'm not sure if they've spoken to federations about this, players, ex-players, coaches, before making these kind of decisions. But it seems to me that the governing bodies of the individual associations and then the regional associations and then FIFA, they don't have enough ex-players and ex-referees working with them, actually involved in the day-to-day running of the sport at FA, regional, and then FIFA level. So FA, UEFA, FIFA, for example, there's not enough ex-players and ex-coaches of both men's and women's games involved with the governance of the sport. It's pen pushers, it's administrators who haven't played the game at a professional level, and even if they played at a semi-pro amateur level, they still probably haven't played the game. Five-a-side kickabout down the park with your mates when you're 14 years old is not playing the game at a high level. They haven't played in a comp. This is the problem with sports administration. I'm rambling a little bit, but it's the problem. I don't think whoever came up with the idea of VAR actually in FIFA and going, right, we need a video assistant referee. I don't think they communicated with sports like rugby union, rugby league, where they have the TMO or the bunker in the NRL. I don't think they communicated with the AFL. I don't think they communicated with the NHL, the NFL, the CFL, the sports in North America that use it. I don't think they communicated with the IOC, where some sports do use it, are sanctioned by the IOC at the Olympics. They did not do their due diligence. Whoever came up with this wanted to do it the FIFA way. And I can't believe it took as long as it did to get it up there. There's enough TV cameras. There's about 100 TV cameras in a stadium. This is why rugby union, rugby league pick up citing offences like that. If a player puts an elbow in, an eye gouge, they're picked up by the citing commissioner like that. So I'm really surprised that it's taken as long as it has to get a video referee into football, and how badly it's been implemented. Whoever came up with the idea of it has not really spoken to people who play or have played or coach the sport. It's thought up in some back room at an office during an ideas meeting of some management. It really has been poorly implemented and badly thought through. What do I think of West Ham United? I think, well, I've got a lot of friends who are West Ham fans. My mate's dad's a West Ham fan. A couple of my good friends are West Ham fans. I think the issue with West Ham is the stadium, and the way they've handled the move from Upton Park to the London City Stadium. I think that's where my opinion of West Ham really comes from in recent years. Is the ownership and the stadium situation has left many feeling frustrated with the ownership, and that's left a negative feeling around the club a little bit. Is the owners and the fans don't really like each other, and that's my opinion on West Ham United. I think they're a club of a decent size. They should have had more success than they've had. Everton, they last won a trophy 24 years ago. That says all you need to know about where Everton are failing compared to Liverpool and other teams in their part of the country. Their nearest rivals have been more successful in recent years than they have. They were a very good team in the 80s. They won important trophies in the 80s. They were competing for trophies in the 80s. They were winning trophies in the 80s. They haven't won a trophy for 24 years. That's enough you need to know about Everton as a club, where their direction's gone compared to Liverpool, compared to Manchester United, compared to Man City, compared to even Blackburn have won more trophies than Everton in the last 25 years. So that's the direction Everton have gone. Is they've gone down the wrong path, be it in transfers, management decisions, squad selection, youth policy. Liverpool's here, Everton's here. Liverpool have gone that way, Everton have gone that way. Liverpool haven't won a league trophy, Everton haven't won a league trophy, but Liverpool have won more cup silverware, and they've added European, Champions Leagues, UEFA Cups, particularly Europa League now, FA Cup, Leagues Cups. Everton have won nothing in 25 years. That's all you need to know about the direction Everton are taking. West Ham, as they blow lots of bubbles. Yeah, I don't know where that idea came from with the Hammers blowing bubbles, because it's a weird one, but it's like the St. Louis Blues in the NHL with the song Gloria. It's just one of them where it sort of came from somewhere. Someone decided to come with some soap, some washing up liquid, and blow some bubbles one day. It is what it is. I mean, it's one of them. I don't know where it actually came from. I'm gonna have to look into that. But West Ham themselves, they were they've got an iron mascot. They've got a mascot in the shape of a hammer. So again, work out well with that what you will. Some of the club mascots, I don't know who designs them, but they need to have some mental health therapy. Personal opinion, they need to have some therapy there. No, but I think Manchester United right now, there's a lot of issues with behind the scenes management. The Glazers, the fans don't like the Glazers very much. when the Glazers bought the club back in the early 2000s, they brought a lot of debt with them. And if you look at the Glazers' ownership of sports teams, they get successful in the early days, and then they're not successful after that. It's a money-making scheme for them. The Glazers, when they bought the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they won the Super Bowl, have won nothing else with them since. They basically bought a team so they could win and make money. They've done the winning, now they're making money. Manchester United still makes a profit. This is what bizarrely is going on. But they've appointed Ed Woodward as chairman or vice chairman or whatever. So Ed Woodward, who's not a footballing man, is in charge of the money strings. Enough said there. If you followed the British media or read some of the articles or go on social media, you'll see a lot of discontent towards Ed Woodward. Obviously, when you've had a manager for over, I think Alex Ferguson was at Man United from 86 to 7 years ago. What was that? Was it over 30 years? Yeah, it was over 30 years. Alex Ferguson was manager at Old Trafford. That kind of long-term players getting used to the voice. You know, they've had a lot of managers since he's gone. There's been no managerial stability at Old Trafford since Ferguson retired. You've had Moyes, you've had Van Gaal, you've had Giggs, you've had Mourinho, you've now got Solskjaer. People are slacking off Solskjaer, but it's not actually his fault, the situation that he finds the team in. And, you know, ironically, he's the most successful of Ferguson's ex-players into management. I wouldn't say it's necessarily over, but I would say that with the way that football is these days, I think I wouldn't say it's necessarily over, but I would say that there are massive issues structurally with the club and the ownership. The fact that the owners came in and gave and lumped the club with a lot of debt every year because they're on a credit system. They do rely a lot on loans. Much like you, if you were to have a mortgage, you have to pay your mortgage off. They basically, in layman's terms, they've mortgaged the club, have the Glazers, and they're not very popular owners. Fans, not all fans, bought in. That's why you got FC United and Manchester. That's why the class of '92 bought Salford City. The class of '92 could have become shareholders if Alex Ferguson was still manager and the old ownership was still there. I wouldn't be surprised if the former players of class of '92 actually bought back into the club to become shareholders. They bought Salford City, which is down the road. And now they're in the Football League, and so it's more likely that, say, a League or FA Cup tie, Salford City, Manchester United, that could be really interesting if they were to go head-to-head, for example. But no, since the Glazers have taken over, it shows how good a manager Alex Ferguson actually was, because the season after, how bad the team were within a season. Within a season, it showed how good he was as a coach, as a manager. Much like look at the Brisbane Broncos in the NRL. Wayne Bennett leaves. South Sydney Rabbitohs, he carries on the good work that was there under Seibold. Seibold, good young coach, had a great first season with South Sydney, goes to Brisbane in a straight swap, a season early, mind, and the team is horrific. And he's basically got the same players, apart from a few players who retired or moved on, that Wayne Bennett had the year before. It shows the quality of what Alex Ferguson was as a manager in dealing with an aging average side, basically, with average players. I think they're going to have to spend some money. They're going to have to sell Pogba. That's my opinion of Paul Pogba. He's lazy. They're going to have to sell Pogba. They're going to have to sell Sanchez. They're going to have to try and recoup some of the money off Sanchez's contract, sell Pogba off, and invest that money in some new players. But with the transfer market as it is and the overinflation, who knows what's going to happen. But they need to freshen up the squad. They need to actually promote some of their youth players more. Stop relying on mercenary players like Paul Pogba and Alexis Sanchez. They need to just put all the youth in there. Solid. Go with the youth. Go with the youth. Give them a shot. Get them some first team experience. Go with the young players. The senior players have failed them, so go with the young players. That's a personal opinion. Paul Pogba, he's too hot and cold. I get streaky players who are streaky scorers or streaky performers, where they can go really well for 10 games and have a few off games. But Pogba, in a game, he's good and bad. He can't defend either. Out of Arsenal, Man United, and Liverpool, Liverpool are far ahead of Arsenal, Man United. Arsenal, their transfer policy in the last 10 years, 10, 12 years of Wenger's time in charge was a joke. Unai Emery's got a tough task ahead of him to get that side back to the standard that it was under Wenger in the early years. Man United, no, they're in chaos. Liverpool, they are the best bet. They lost by a point, so Liverpool are the best bet for the league next year. Fun question with the lazy Berbatov. Dimitar Berbatov was the laziest striker, but he achieved his potential, should I say. Dimitar Berbatov, laziest striker right now. That's a tough one. I might have to look outside the Premier League for that. There are some very, very good players. Pogba isn't a striker, though. Pogba's just a creative midfield player who can't defend. Fuck. This is a tough one. Tough. It's tough. Lazy striker. So this is a tough one because I don't think there's actually any potential lazy striker. I think they're up there to score, so they're going to be hanging in the final third, waiting for that pass. I'm assuming we're looking at tracking back and actually being involved in the defensive side of the game because it's an 11-man game. It's not just you wait up there. You have to defend with your other 9 outfield players and your goalkeeper. So lazy striker is a difficult one, but I think the laziest striker I think I've ever saw in the Premier League was Dimitar Berbatov. He wouldn't track back. You wouldn't get Berbatov tracking back at the other end of the field. He would walk half the time. So I would say Dimitar Berbatov is probably the laziest. Am I watching State of Origin tonight? No, I can't. Because I obviously live in the UK. I've got to be up for work at silly o'clock in the morning. So I State of Origin. I mean, it'll be happening. It'll be happening now, actually. No, I'm not watching State of Origin tonight. But if the Blues lose, then it undoes all the hard work they did last year. I think some of the Blues selection, I've been scratching my head over that. They should actually have the better side, personally, over Queensland on paper, but they're not selecting the right players. But I'm not a NRL selector. I'm not a State of Origin selector. I think the Blues have thrown away their advantage of having the better squad of players, basically the better crop of players available to them. They're throwing it away because of choosing how they're selecting the halfbacks, how they're selecting certain players in certain positions. They are throwing away the advantage they have with actual quality players right now. I think Queensland had their golden generation for the last decade or so. I think it's now the Blues' opportunity to have that opportunity, and I think they're throwing away with the selection. But I haven't watched enough of the NRL the last couple of weeks to say who's lost form, who's in form. But I think the debate about the halves is the big problem and the control of the game. But I think you could put Jack Whiten in the halves because he's played in the halves all season for Canberra, but they're not. They're putting him in a different position. Why waste someone who's actually doing quite well? I don't know. Yeah, but I didn't watch enough Huddersfield games to really comment on Mooney being lazy. I just the fact that Huddersfield had a shocking season. I think the whole team needs to look at themselves and go, we didn't play well enough. Personally, to be fair, it's an 11-man game. It's a team game. You've got to track back. The modern forward has to be able to track back. That's something that Alexis Sanchez does quite well. Is he does run around a lot. He will itchy ear. He will. Alexis Sanchez, for all his flaws and the debate about is he paid too much at Man United? Is he living up to his potential? Has he hit the skids? As a player, you watch him for Chile, he will run all over the pitch. You watch him when he was at Arsenal, at his best at Arsenal, Barcelona. He's not an out-and-out goal scorer who'll score you 40 goals a season, but he's a forward who will do the hard work and track back. He's an energy guy. You need that kind of with your centre forwards. This is where Harry Kane isn't good enough for me. I don't know why Harry Kane is as rated as he is. He scores penalties, big deal. He's got no pace. He doesn't have the tracking back technique. I'm sorry, Harry Kane. I think Harry Kane could be the overrated striker. There you go. Not necessarily throwing away their potential, but he's not captain material, and he's not as good as people make out he is. MBE for doing what? Losing a World Cup. Okay. The crowd numbers in Perth, I would expect them to be very, very good. Every time the NRL takes games on the road, and I think Rugby Union World Cup. I think every time I've seen Rugby League World Cup, every time I've seen games in Perth, they've been well supported. It's an idea to put a team there, perhaps NRL. But the earliest that the NRL will look at expansion or relocation is 2021. So we've got 2 years to wait until the current TV deal expires before they look at putting a team in Perth permanently. But I think that is going to be an option, especially on the Sydney sides that are really struggling at the moment. That could be an option, and it will not be Cronulla because they own their stadium. State of Origin tonight over in Perth. The Blues on paper have the better team, but in practice, they're not putting it into practice. They're not putting the best players in the best positions. The halves, I wouldn't have Cleary in the halves as a starting half. No, I wouldn't have Cleary in there. Put Jack White in there as the diamond in the rough, as the joker, because he's played so well in the halves for Canberra, moving from fullback. He's big, he's physical. He won't be intimidated by big forwards running his channel in defence. You got to go with something like that. I think they are wasting the fact that they are the better side. They have the better players to select from at the moment in form. Queensland, I think they've had their golden generation, but they've been given a free pass by really strange selection from the Blues. Brad Fittler, I don't know who is helping him select these players, but I think they're throwing away an opportunity to tie the series or even win the series. They could and should have swept the series last year. They didn't, and I think that's carried on to this year because I think it's the Blues' time to win at least 2 or 3 in a row, and they fluffed it. Apart from that, I couldn't really tell you. Who's going to win? I think looking at the fact you couldn't have a half finish, with Walker not being able to finish an 80-minute game, that's a problem. So if you're choosing a player who's not fully fit, there's your first issue. And I'm also trying to scratch my head as why Jarrod Croker isn't in the Blues side. I'm trying to scratch my head going, why do they keep not selecting him? Because he's captain fantastic at Canberra. He does a lot of things at Canberra that you wouldn't expect a man of his size and ability to do, but he does it. They just need that solid leadership down. I think if the Blues don't go for broke and just throw everything in the kitchen sink at the Maroons can just get through it, I think. And if it's a draw, then that makes it really interesting for the final game. But I don't know. I honestly do think the Blues are throwing away an opportunity with the players they have available to select to win State of Origin back to back for the first time in 15 years. I really think the Blues have not had this opportunity since Andrew Johns was in the halves, and they're throwing it away. But from all the NRL games that I've watched so far this season, the players that are available for the Blues selection have really... This is available players. This is not the players they've selected, but the available talent pool that a lot of the players are not getting a look in for whatever reason. And that fault lies with the selectors for the last 15 years. It's not just that they won last year and they won in 2014. Okay, winning 2 Origins out of how many? There is an issue with the selector side of things, and that lies with the New South Wales Rugby League. That lies with the team selectors. And why they keep going with certain players who are just not good enough, and why players are getting overlooked, like Jarrod Croker. How has he not had a State of Origin call-up? Explain that one to me. Because he's one of only a few players to score 100 tries and get over 1,000 points in NRL, and he's never. It's just it is what it is. Do I follow boxing? Not as much as I used to. I've gone off boxing over recent years. I think almost every major boxing, everything's a pay-per-view now. Even on free-to-air TV in the UK, they've made everything a pay-per-view, which is madness. Anthony Joshua losing is probably sums up him as a boxer. He's overrated, personally. He was battered by Ruiz, absolutely battered. I think Anthony Joshua was overrated. Eddie Hearn's made a lot of money off him. Even on the free-to-air channels, they're putting pay-per-views in, so I do not understand that, and people are just not watching it. I think boxing's reached a point where they've oversaturated the viewership market with pay-per-views, and a lot of people are just finding VPNs to get around it. I think people are getting bored with boxing, with the constant over promotion, pay per view, pay per view, pay per view. They just don't want to watch it. And the caliber of boxer right now is nowhere near as good as it was in the 90s and early 2000s. I think it's just not as good as what it once was, but it's a sport that has a lot of problems, a lot of issues, and has had issues for years. And I don't know. If you're looking at a sport that does have a ticking time bomb, it is boxing, because other sports are having this CTE, the brain injury lawsuit in North America, and that's going to have massive implications for those sports with the various you know sports now with head injuries. And boxing is, your job is to hit a guy repetitively in the head for 12 rounds. So I think boxing, when it comes to post-fighter welfare, when they finished fighting, when they've retired, they don't do enough. Not every fighter makes multi-millions in their career. Only a very small percentage do make the big money. So boxing has a big problem. Plus, you've got the 4 different, federations to unify. There's not just one world heavyweight title. There's like 4 of them: IBF, WBO. I forget them all now. The other 2. So there's not a consistency in the sport, in the sense that there's one body that you're fighting for, like FIFA and football. You're playing for the FIFA World Cup. In boxing, you're trying to unify all these belts in your various boxing organizations, which is bizarre, but it is what it is. And so I think boxing as a sport needs to look at itself and go, we've got problems, and they do. They really do. The Hitman, Hearns, Leonard, everyone's got their favourite boxers or favourite athletes of an era. I do think Tyson Holyfield, that was an interesting moment back in the mid-90s, that will never be forgotten. That will live in infamy for forever. But no, I think they're over promoted. A lot of the boxers are just gym monkeys. As Anthony Joshua, he's great if he wants to be a bodybuilder. He's not built like a true heavyweight. The ear biting. Well, there you go. That's an iconic moment for all the wrong reasons, admittedly. Will Fury beat Wilder? I think Tyson Fury, while he's a flawed character, and I'm not a big fan of everything he does and says, I appreciate what he's trying to do. Deontay Wilder, I don't know. But Tyson Fury's fighting and keeping himself fit and in training constantly. So I think I don't know. With the state of the heavyweight division at the moment, and the state of boxing as a sport in general at the moment, I look at social media a lot. I get most of my news before the main news does off social media, with people saying things are happening, such as big sports trades in the NHL, for example. Well, because I'm a big ice hockey fan. I do think Tyson Fury, because he's constantly fighting almost every couple of months, he's constantly in the gym, he's constantly keeping fit, he's constantly keeping himself busy, which is something where he went wrong earlier in his career a couple of years ago with the mental health issues and the drugs, and admitting to his problems, I think, was a brave thing to do, because they threw him under the bus. They really did. As a sport, they didn't look after him. Yeah, I think he's got a very, very good chance. Will he beat him? It depends on a whole variety of factors. A lucky punch and you can be out, but there's not enough direct knockouts in boxing anymore. Fights should be stopped long before they are. But again, I don't watch. I've gone off boxing to the point where it seems every other week there's a pay-per-view. Bearing in mind that a lot of the channels that have the pay-per-views on, you're already paying a subscription for, so you're paying double to watch the fight, basically. It's a money-making scheme by the promoters, and it's pissing off a lot of boxing fans. There's very limited free-to-air boxing, and when there is that on, it's always on a minor channel with limited viewership, because it's not well advertised, and you have to dig for it and find it, and it's normally the lower level on the card, and it's always the lower level fighters who are coming through, and they're still far better than I'll ever be, but it is just a rip-off. They've been doing it for a long time now, and it's like it in the UK. But of course, the UK regulators have failed to realise the use of VPNs, and so people just get around it on the internet and illegally stream. More people have illegally streamed fights than actually pay for the pay-per-views. So that says something. I think I think it was the Anthony Joshua, one of the Fury fights, more people were illegally streamed online than actually paid for the pay-per-view. And that's telling you something. That's telling you that the fans have had enough. Because in real terms, the average person like you or me doesn't have the disposable income to keep paying for this stuff. They really don't. Wages have been squeezed, living costs have gone up, wages haven't increased with those costs. It is a rip-off. They've milked us dry. They've reached a point where they've oversaturated the market, and people are just switching off. They are switching off in growing numbers year on year. They've gone, no, we're not doing it anymore. No, we're not doing it anymore. No, we're not doing it anymore. Eventually, they'll get the hint. If people stop buying the pay-per-views, then they'll get the hint they're not making any money, because they sell the pay-per-view on the basis that the prize pot that each fighter gets for battering the crap out of each other for anywhere up to 12 rounds, they're anticipating that people are going to buy the pay-per-view. And if people don't buy the pay-per-view, they've got to pay these fighters somehow, and that's when the promoter loses money, and that's where the promoter goes, oh. They're relying on the fact that there's always going to be someone desperate enough to watch people give each other brain damage for up to 2 to 3 hours. They are relying on the fact that this is why the pay-per-view is also flawed, because a fight could be over in a round. Less than that. Was it Lennox Lewis or Audley Harrison was done in like 60 seconds. He was knocked flat on his arse and done and knocked out. They're trying to sell that as a pay-per-view when it could be done in less than 2 minutes. You're paying 25 quid for a guy to get his head bashed in for 2 minutes. That's the issue with MMA and UFC and Bellator. Bellator is actually shown a lot of the time in this country, at least in the UK, on free-to-air on a channel called Channel 5, which is a minor. Well, it's not a minor channel. It's a decent-sized network of channels, but they show it free-to-air. But UFCs are behind a pay-per-view. A fight can be over in less than 5 seconds. I've seen MMA fights that have lasted less than a couple of seconds, where the guy is just one punch and he's out. So pay-per-view is always a flawed, dangerous concept, unless the fight is fixed, and then you make the money's worth. That's where the issue of throwing fights in boxing, where they go, right, this has got to go 12 rounds, or this has got to go a minimum of 8 rounds. And the boxers just hug and batter each other in a way that they won't knock each other out, but they're hurting each other. And then it's just really sloppy boxing because of the pay-per-view structure. It has to go to make it worth the money. It is what it is. I think it's the way it is, but it's got to change. The business model is dying, and people are less willing to sign up, so the pay-per-view price goes up. They raise the price, less people watch. They raise the price, less people watch, and it's been proven that more and more people are finding ways online to not pay for it and watch via a VPN. And that's got to be a hint to the promoters that we might want to change things up a little bit, because people are have had enough, absolutely had enough, and rightly so, because these athletes are demanding bigger and bigger salaries, bigger and bigger prize pots. So we're looking at all sports here. They're demanding more money, bigger wages, bigger salaries, yet the average fan has actually had their wages frozen for a lot of them, or small increases below inflation. So they're actually worse off than they were the year before for better part of a decade. So where's this money? Why should athletes deserve a massive wage increase, whereas the average person in the street gets a below inflation wage increase? It's just not. This is where I think the professional sport is losing its way with the fan base of the fans that support the professional sportsmen. Why do they deserve a massive increase in the amount of money they earn in prize money or salary, whereas the average fan is actually worse off now than they were before 10 years ago, in real terms? Conor McGregor wants to throw us like a bus rowing league. Conor McGregor is a prime example of what is wrong with prize fighters and what's wrong with what I call blood sports. Badly advised. Is this all publicity, or is this actual criminality? It's a bit of both. He's made UFC a lot of money, But I always say this with a lot of high profile sports stars, especially in sports like this. You have to look at them when they retire and what they do. And the amount of boxers who've had issues with drugs post-retirement or even while they're boxing, the amount of football players, the amount of rugby players, ice hockey players, you look at them and you have to look at the amount that have issues. It's not a good look for a sport when it can't look after its ex-sports stars, its ex-players, its ex-fighters, its ex, when it can't look after them post-retirement. Oh yeah, it's all about the circus with McGregor, and while it can be kind of funny, some of the fake trash talking, it's also kind of embarrassing that a grown man would act like that. So, it is what it is. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with it, but it is kind of embarrassing. What's this? I've got something. I've got an invocation for a mate's birthday that I don't care about. Right, okay, cool. It is kind of like it's become a circus. Boxing's become a circus years ago. MMA's become a circus. And in my personal opinion, it's kind of embarrassing watching the circus unfold. It really is. The antics around what happened at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn and the antics that happened in Vegas, I don't know how you quantify that as a good image. But I'll say this: I don't think UFC's a family viewing somehow. I don't think UFC's family viewing. Israel Folau. We'll get on to Israel Folau in a second. I started discussing it at the beginning of the video, and I will get on to Israel Folau in a second. But that's becoming a circus in itself, and that's all money based as well. He wants money. Yes, and of course, the Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi, wax on, wax off. The lack of discipline in professional boxing and professional martial arts is embarrassing. That's not true what it means, but it's modern society. The Israel Folau saga. Okay, so I've covered this a lot on the channel since last year when he first posted what he posted on Instagram. I've just got an itchy finger. I've got a bit of a bite on my finger. Been itching. Right. So yeah, basically last year at Easter he posted his initial post the first time, and this was at the time when he was in ongoing contract talks with Rugby Australia about his upcoming contract extension. He took it down. He gets his contract. He gets $4 million per year for 4 years. It's a pretty decent contract. Pretty decent. That's not including sponsorship. So he's on pretty decent money suddenly. So he's got his way by forcing their hand, by calling their bluff. A year later, he does it again. Doesn't work out so well. But we have to go back in time, as I say. So we look at what happened with Western Force and the amount of money they required, which was just a little bit more than what Israel Folau would get per season. We're looking at what happened at the Melbourne Rebels right now, financially. Similar amount of money needed. And now we look at, it was 12 million or something, or 16 million over 4 years at 4 million Australian dollars per year before sponsorships. It's all about money. It's all about the money. Because if he was to get injured or suspended or his contract bought out, he doesn't necessarily make that money for the entire time. There'll be a signing on bonus in there as well, which will make up a lot of that money. So he might have actually got paid a huge proportion of his salary before it even works out at 4 million per year. That's what it works out at. In reality, signing on bonuses make up a huge percentage of what he would have earned in the initial contract. So he would have actually earned more than half his money in the last year. That's what signing on bonus basically is. The issue then is Western Force and now Melbourne Rebels was screaming out for a bit of assistance from Rugby Australia, and they haven't got it. And Super Rugby as an entity is in financial crisis going forward into the next decade. He's now trying to raise a crowd fund to fight his legal case. And Drew Mitchell, former Wallabies teammate, has ripped into him on Twitter so well. It's a beautiful rip by Drew Mitchell of how he's basically described the actions of Israel Folau as pure greed. It's got nothing to do with religious freedom. It's got nothing to do with discrimination on those grounds for false unfair dismissal. It's pure greed. he breached his code of conduct, which is basically he breached the contract that he was given by Rugby Australia. Rugby Australia said, look, you can be religious, you can be a homophobe if you really want, just don't talk about it online. You can be as homophobic and religiously bigoted as you want, just online or in public. Keep that to yourself. He decided to make as much publicity out of this as possible. That's it. The guy's an asshole. That's my personal opinion. As more information comes out and as we build a better picture, we see a better picture of the man, and the man is of pure greed. And he's now in sermons, which he's allowed to be filmed, publicly attacking minority groups very openly from the pulpit, very openly, with no fear of recrimination, because it's inside of a house of God. He's using religion as a way to get away with such heinous comments and actions. So initially I thought, okay, he is religious, they have these views, it's a bit difficult to go, okay, it's a hard one. As time goes on, he's using religion as a shield for his homophobia. That's basically what's going on. But it's all about money, because he wants to have 10 million, which would be the rest of the money he would have been owed post signing on bonus. He wants basically the rest of his contract. He wants the value of the rest of his contract, basically, because he would have had his signing on bonus plus his first year's salary. That's what he's after. He's after, in a one-off payment, the rest of what his contract's worth. It's all about money. It's all about money. Plain and simple. There is no hiding behind this. I don't give a toss what the fundamental Christians say anymore, because they're all bigoted in their own way. They're all deluded. I've got friends who are Christian. I've got friends who are also gay. I've got friends who are gay and Christian. You work that one out. Because at no point in the Bible, in the scriptures of the New Testament, not the Old, sod the Old Testament, the New Testament, at no point is a person's sexuality or gender brought actually into. And if you read the Bible, it's a very sexist book anyway. If you read the Bible, it's also a description of how to keep someone into sexual slavery and to hold them against their will, and genocide and racism. The Bible is a great book to teach people all about racism, homophobia, genocide, bigotry. It's a great book. So it's a bigot's hand manual. But yeah, no, he's been criticised because he's showing his greed, because his fundamental Christian church is minted. They get tax-free status because they're a religious organisation. He could ask for a donation at church, but he's asked for people online to donate. And I bet you the people who've donated are also doing it under religious tax exemptions as a religious donation or a charitable donation, which is tax exempt. That's why they're doing it. So it is what it is, but it's basically pure greed. The amount of money he's asking for out of Rugby Australia in his lawsuit is the amount of money that's left over in his contract that's yet to be paid out to him, which is 10 million. So there's a 2 million signing on bonus in the first year, and on top of the 4 million. And then after that, 2 of the seasons will be $1 million less or something, or $750,000 yes per the rest of the 3 seasons. And it works out that's what he's basically owed if he had fulfilled his contract to the very letter of the contract and had played on until he was 32, 33. That's what he would have got paid. That's basically Israel Folau. I couldn't have described that any better. I don't care if the Christian fundamentalists, get their knickers in a twist and try and, have a whinge, but that's what it is. Do I think the LGBT community have got a lot more favourable rights now? Yeah. I think it's skewed both ways, but I think we've definitely gone too politically correct. But at the same time, when someone is using their so-called faith as a shield for their homophobia and their bigotry, then it damages the image of religion as well, which is not in tune with young people these days. There's a reason why less people are going to church. Yeah, because the church's teachings on marriage, sexuality, gender are not in keeping with what society is. So there is that one. But I want to move on from Israel Folau, because I could spend all day discussing each step that has happened, but I could also discuss the issues with Rugby Australia, and I've done that before a lot, and my position on it hasn't changed, and my views on how they're dealing with the situation haven't changed. We're just a few weeks further down the line with it getting more toxic and there are more issues. Israel Folau is painting himself as an absolute idiot, and he is a greedy idiot, but an idiot nonetheless. Rugby Australia, their silence is staggering. They've not really made much more comment post, the end of the code of conduct hearing. They've not really said much, and this is a World Cup year, so I'm surprised like Michael Chaker hasn't come out, and other people quite high up haven't come out and said, this is really unsettling for the players. The media are giving this guy too much airtime. They're not talking to Michael Chaker and the squad that's been selected to play these warm-up games as the training squad and then go on to the World Cup. And it's those players that are going to be the ones on the field in Japan battling to bring the Webber Ellis Trophy back to Australia. And I think they've been unsettled by all of this, no doubt. And if Australia have a brilliant tournament without Israel Folau, it's because they've worked hard as a team. They're not reliant on one superstar greedy arsehole. If they get battered, it's because they're probably really unsettled with what's going on with their federation, uncertainty financially, because Rugby Australia will be bankrupted if Israel Folau wins, but they shouldn't have signed him on such a big contract in the first place. They should have supported Western Force in the Super Rugby, and then they should have supported Melbourne Rebels in the Super Rugby. I don't know. I think it is a massive restructuring. I think they've completely got it wrong with how they've approached the Israel Folau contract to begin with, and then how they failed to support Western Force, and how they're failing to right now support Melbourne Rebels. But they were happy to pay the amount of money required to keep those teams going to Israel Folau. They were happy to sign him to that length of contract. They were happy to sign him up for stupidly big money, but they weren't happy to release the same amount of funds to support a whole squad of players in Western Australia in Perth. I'd much rather have Nick Cummings, the Honey Badger, playing on the world stage than Israel Folau. I'd much rather see Nick, the Honey Badger Cummings, running down the wing than Israel Folau on the wing or at fullback or at centre. I'd much rather see Nick Cummings, because I know he's a heart and soul guy who's not in it for the money. He's in it for the joy of the sport, and Rugby Australia have lost him to the sport because they wouldn't support Western Force. So there you go. There's an answer for that one. But I always was a Nick Cummings fan, but I do think, yeah. Well, look, he wouldn't have to do a post-rugby career in the media at his age if Western Force was still in Super Rugby. He would still be playing rugby union in Super Rugby and for Australia, because if he goes abroad, which he's done before, he's not eligible for selection. He's not eligible for selection under Australian rules, unless it's the Matt Giteau rule. And he's not one of those players that is absolute superstar player like Israel Folau would be. If Israel Folau was to play in Europe, he would be, and hadn't done what he's done, he'll be back. He'll be straight in the Wallabies squad because he's Matt Giteau rule, because he's that key to Australia. But Nick Cummings was a heart and soul guy who would run all day long, tackle all day long, and score tries. And players like that, who are the heart and soul guys that make up a team and do more for a team on and off the field by their presence, by their actions, have been let down. Hard-working guys have been let down by Rugby Australia and their stupidity. And Israel Folau, he could kill the sport. But there are bigger issues with Australian rugby, and I have discussed them with youth players going on to play league, and not retaining those youth players into the earlier ranks of rugby union. The second tier competition in Australia being really, really poor. It is what it is. Do I see Leeds Rhinos getting relegated from Super League? Quite possibly, yes. The Broncos are now on a win streak. Broncos are unbeaten in 3, winning 3 massive games, especially beating St Helens and beating Hull KR in the week, relegation rivals. Or was it Hull FC? I can't remember. But no, the London Broncos have gone on this win streak. They've leapfrogged them. Leeds are in trouble. Leeds are in massive trouble. And you could link that to the fact that a lot of their top players retired and moved on at the same time. Retired. And you could look at Kevin Sinfield being brought in as well. Kevin Sinfield being brought in as a performance director / coach. While he was a great player, both Union and League, he played last season for Yorkshire Carnegie, but he was well regarded because in the rugby community in Leeds. Great players don't necessarily make great administrators or great coaches. Well, I argue a lot for having more ex-players involved with the running of a game and a sport and having their input. It didn't work out. Quick question. I missed a question earlier. The Tampa Bay Rays want to split games between there and Montreal. Well, the Montreal Expos were a baseball team, and they were moved to Washington DC. I think they've worked out that baseball in Florida isn't working. Florida is an interesting sports market. It's not necessarily working in Florida, but we'll see what happens if Major League Baseball's okay with the games being split between Montreal and Tampa. Back to the Leeds Rhinos, though. Yeah, Kevin Sinfields, it hasn't fully worked. A lot of players have moved on. They've lost a lot of their leadership core. They've lost a lot of their experience. They're in a rebuild, literally. But the problem is the NRL, you can rebuild. There's no relegation. Super League, yeah, you can't afford to rebuild. You've got to get players straight away. And yeah, they are facing down the barrel of ending up much like Bradford Bulls, their nearest rivals, not in Super League. They're out the Challenge Cup, losing to the Bradford Bulls. And they're bottom of the table and they're propping it up. They are in trouble. They are in massive trouble. They've had a long spell of success. They've been the most successful side in the Super League in the last 15 years. But again, they've had this long period of winning. And when they start losing, the players just don't know how to react to it. They haven't been in this adversity before where they've lost so many games in the season as a group. And there's a lot of young players there. And, the London Broncos, the joy they have is they've won a lot of games to get to this point. They know they've had to work hard to get to this point. And they're now winning games with the smallest budget and a championship squad. So it does show that the gap between Super League and Championship is not as big as it is. And we're looking at the Leeds Rhinos be mismanaged off the field as well because, instead of you had that core there for too long and there wasn't enough competition for places when those senior players were dominating positions when they were well past their best, and they've gone. A topic of relegation came out this week. I think, yeah, that will ultimately help Australian football having a second tier, ultimately help having that option for more teams to go up and go down, and it means teams will have to play harder at the bottom rather than just doss around when they realise they're not going to get to the final stage or whatever like that. I think that would definitely improve things, but in that case they might have to get rid of finals football, like the grand final, and just have it as a standard best team wins the league, and then have a separate cup competition for the leagues, the teams to play for, like an FA Cup or a League Cup kind of cup knockout competition, which is more fun. It adds more value to the game. You wish Super League was more on the same level as the NRL. Super League actually at one point was the better competition, especially during the Super League wars in Australia in the mid-90s, when before the NRL was actually a league. The Super League as a league was switched to the summer here in the UK, obviously Australian winter, to parallel it with Australia, and Rupert Murdoch put it on King Sky. So it is what it is. But in the early years, Super League was better than the NRL. What now is the NRL, the former New South Wales Rugby League. It was the better competition by a long way, by a massive stretch. There was no argument there. However, the last decade or so, that has flipped on its head. And the NRL has surged ahead, and Super League, dwindling crowds, TV deal is not perfect. The lack of growth in the south of England. I think that if the London Broncos stay up, that is vital for rugby league in the south. If the London Scholars get into the Championship, again, vital for rugby league in the south of England. There seems to be an issue with growing the game in the right locations, but that's what it is. But over the last decade or so, especially basically the period where Queensland were dominating State of Origin for forever, apart from 2 State of Origins, that's when it flipped. When you had Cameron Smith, Cronk, and Slater all playing at their peak, that's when NRL became the superior competition, with the Queensland dominance. I still believe, even though Queensland aren't dominant anymore, I still believe the NRL is a better competition. Quality of player, the fact that the best English players are going over to the NRL to ply their trade. I I still think the NRL is still the better competition now, but it wasn't always the case. There was a period of time where rugby league in Australia had an uncertain future between 95 and 98. The future of the rugby league in Australia with the Super League wars wasn't certain. And a lot of Australian players, rather than not have this lack of certainty in what is now the NRL, came over to Super League to play. We had some great players in the mid-90s from Australia and New Zealand coming over here to play, and a lot of them stayed till the end of their careers. The Paul brothers stayed. We had some really great players come over here for lengthy spells and play a lot of seasons here. Peter Sterling came over here for a long time to play. And whether that's good or bad for the game is another thing. But Super League now is not in the same place it was 25 years ago when it was the better competition. I'm putting that out there. Right now, the NRL is far superior than Super League. But that's from what I see. That's from obviously what you see. Not everyone will agree with that. But that's my personal opinion. I think, Super League is the secondary competition now. It's like if you look at the debate between the NHL and the KHL, the NHL is the better competition. It's the better league. It's the better quality. The KHL is still damn good quality ice hockey, but it's considered not the best. And the NHL has always been seen as the best professional ice hockey league in the world, without a doubt. Apart from the WHA in the 70s, the NHL has been the dominant professional ice hockey league globally. The NRL, though, there are issues with the NRL going forward. They have to look at expanding to Perth. They cannot ignore that market. If they're playing State of Origin in Perth, I think they need to put a team in Perth. Plain and simple. They also need another team in the South Island of New Zealand. So an 18-team comp is doable. It is doable. They've been as high as 20 teams before. They can play an 18-team competition, no problem. When the NRL was first started, it was a 20-team league. So that BS that we can't have the league any bigger is BS. They've been bigger as a league. I think there were 22 teams at one point. So for me, you're missing out on Adelaide as well. They've taken games to Darwin with great success. Mudgee in the country. They've got rid of City Country, but every time they take games on the road to the rural towns, the small cities in New South Wales, they pack the stadium out. So you could, in theory, have an NRL team in Mudgee, for example, or Wagga Wagga, or I'm trying to think of some other towns and cities inland. But there are definitely settlements in the New South Wales, and to be fair, Ipswich in Queensland, Cairns, for example. You could put a team there, and you could fill a stadium. No problem. The fans want it. It's the NRL that goes, but there's a lack of sponsorship and a lack of corporate. But it doesn't matter. You could whack a team in bloody Fremantle, not just in Perth, but in Fremantle, and fill a stadium. The fans are there. It's all to do with the money. It's corporate money. It's got nothing to do with the fact that those teams could regularly sell out their local stadium, 15,000 regularly sell out, get a bigger crowd than what we're getting in the Super League. Regularly sell out. You could regularly, you could have a team in Gundagai. Absolutely. You could have a team based in like a country team based in country New South Wales and have home games in Mudgee, in Wagga, and go around, fill every stadium, every home game. You could do it. They just choose not to. They choose to get rid of City Country Origin, which was, I think, my favourite Origin, better than the State of Origin. I preferred City Country because it's a one-off game. But they took that away. It's not making enough money. Well, the stands are full. You're filling the stadium. You're getting a good quality game. It means something to these players. It means something to the fans that are watching, that have paid a fair price to go. There's not enough room in the stadium for all the fans to turn up. I don't know. I think you could have a team in Mudgee, and it would be a rather successful team. You could have a team outside of Sydney in Wagga Wagga and pack a stadium. But the NRL chooses not to do it because it's not enough corporate money. And that's part of the problem. It's the corporate money. It's what it boils down to, look, boys and girls. Corporate money. There's not enough corporate money in some of these more rural, smaller regional towns and regional cities that aren't Sydney, Brisbane, and Melbourne. There just isn't the massive population. They see how big an urban area is and go, not a population for it. But it's bananas to me, but that's my personal opinion on it all. But I'm not an Australian. I don't live in Australia. I can't comment on the issues with the NRL when it comes to putting a team in Perth or expansion or relocating teams or whatever. I can't comment on that. But I will say this: I think they are missing out on a lot of people who don't want to travel into Sydney to watch the Roosters Rabbitohs play a game, because it's like a 2, 3, 4, 5 hour drive. They stay at home. They're not being catered to enough. And yeah, they are putting on games on the road, but that's what City Country was all about. They took that away. So, but that's my personal opinion. I mean, look, Australian sport is really odd. It's very East Coast centric. You've got a massive city on the West Coast called Perth, and an urban area around it with Fremantle. You've got Adelaide. Darwin and Palmerston is growing in the Northern Territory. Tasmania is just ignored. Yet the AFL are looking at Tasmania eventually, because a lot of their players come from there. But it's the sporting psyche of Australia is definitely East Coast. We have it here in the UK, especially in rugby league with the North-South divide, rugby union with the North-South divide here in England, where the South of England Sports Union, the North Sports League, more so, although there are league teams in the South with the Scholars and the Broncos around London. There's a few other teams in the Midlands and the South of England when it comes to rugby league. Union, there are teams in the North of England with rugby union, but there is a massive regional divide where neither sport wants to cross that divide as much. Football, I wouldn't say there's a regional divide. It's a quality divide rather than a regional divide. It's a national sport, or what you would call soccer. It's a national sport, but the Northwest around Manchester, Liverpool, Lancashire, Cheshire, that kind of area, parts of it, the Northeast around Newcastle and Sunderland and to Middlesbrough, the Midlands, Birmingham, the West Midlands, and then London and the Southeast. The other areas have football clubs, and some of them are very successful, but the main driving forces are those 4 areas in English football. So it's more a quality divide rather than a regional divide. That's where the most of the silverware goes. Rugby league and rugby union in France is very southern sport, mostly in the southwest of France. That's where most of the rugby's played in France. That's a regional divide. And yeah, rugby fans in the north of France are going, well, why can't we have professional teams? For some reason, it's a cultural thing. You look at other countries, yeah, there are regional divides. There are discussion points about certain things. But it is what it is. I mean, I think with the NRL, though, they need to look at Perth. It's the fastest growing city out there. They've been there before. They are taking. If they're taking state of origin there, I think that is a sign that in 2021 there's going to be a team in Perth, and there's probably going to be a team in another city as well. They're going to have to make it an even team league. Maybe a team on the South Island of New Zealand. Maybe a team in Wagga Wagga. There you go. In the Wagga, maybe a team in Ipswich, and maybe another team in Brisbane. I don't know, but they're going to have to make it an even team, 18-team league, if they're going to whack a team in Perth. We won't find out until 2021. That's when the next TV rights deal is up for discussion. But with all the off-field dramas that the NRL's had in the last couple of years, with certain players and certain teams doing things they shouldn't do, like Jack de Belin, and we can discuss, will he ever play in the NRL again if he's found innocent? Probably not, is the answer to that one. We'll have to wait and see. But I personally think that the debate about can the NRL really call itself a true national competition when the AFL has teams in Perth and has teams in Adelaide and has teams in Sydney and Brisbane and Melbourne, and has gone pretty much everywhere, wants to have a team in Tasmania, plays games on the road in Darwin. The AFL is winning that argument by a long way. So I don't know what else I can really say to that, but it is what it is. I mean, all this started from the discussion about, I think on this kind of thread, is about Israel Folau. Going back to the Israel Folau thing quickly, Part of the problem is they are rugby union in Australia is losing a whole host of players to league at the age of about 17, 18. The best example of a player going from union to league, having a great career and being a future immortal is Cooper Cronk. And I've used that example before. Rugby union in Australia lost Cooper Cronk to rugby union because rugby league and the Melbourne Storm could offer him a basic entry level contract that was a decent amount of money that he could live off, and he went to Melbourne and he played. Yes, the Melbourne Kings Lightning have signed imports. Leeds have definitely got a good goalie. I've seen Leeds' Twitter feed. I'm not sold on their logo though. I don't know who designed their logo, but I'm not sold on it, and that's me being polite. I know, brand new team, they want to get an identity. I get the colours they've used, the gold and blue, which is the colours of Leeds that every team in Leeds play on with their badges and stuff. Even Leeds United have had gold and blue. I think. Right, we're talking about the NHL draft. I didn't get to watch enough of it. I have been actually away from my house for a couple of days. I've been helping a friend out with a few bits and pieces. I've seen. Look, we know Jack Hughes has got number one. We know Kaapo Kakko's got number two. That's the big debating point. I think Kakko is a better player. Having watched him at the World Championships last month, he looked an all-round better player at this current point. But that's not including what coaches and scouts are saying what they could be. And this is a big debate about what they could be. I think the bigger thing about the NHL draft, I didn't watch the NBA draft, I watched the NHL draft, but the bigger thing about young players at this age when they're like 18, 19, 20, 21, if they're drafted a little bit later in age, like 20, 21, we know what they're going to be like. We know this guy is already been playing hockey against men, already been, he's at that level where he's had those extra years development. This could be his ceiling. Your best years were your mid-20s, so he's nearly at his ceiling. Jack Hughes didn't strike me in the World Championships as good as a number one draft pick. You put him against men, he didn't perform as well as Kakko. Kaapo Kakko played a lot better. The young Finnish guy went number 2 overall in the draft. That's my personal opinion. Kakko played better in the World Championships, winning gold, part of a winning team. So he's already got that confidence that with his ability. The game I watched Jack Hughes was against the UK. He couldn't beat Ben Bowns in goal and he definitely went for the shot rebound and he put it in the wrong place. He didn't lift it enough. He still needs to work on things. He may have all the basic skills in creating play, but I think Kaapo Kakko looks all more rounded as a player right now. I don't know. I think you don't get the draft thing. I think the draft thing is because it's a franchise-based system. That basically means those teams don't have a youth system. They will have affiliate teams, which is completely different to a youth setup. So basically, I'm going to go with the two teams that I know a fair bit about that have affiliate teams. The two teams that I follow in the NHL, the Winnipeg Jets have the Manitoba Moose as their affiliate. Now, the Manitoba Moose will have an AHL draft that they will go through. So those players that don't make it to the NHL draft level will get put into the AHL draft level. And below that, you have the ECHL, which is the East Coast Hockey League. And not every NHL team has an affiliate in the East Coast Hockey League. So some teams will share East Coast Hockey League teams to develop their depth prospects or their younger prospects who are not quite ready for the AHL, NHL kind of level. So Liam Kirk, he gets drafted by the Coyotes, 7th overall, doesn't go to the ECHL, doesn't go to the AHL because he's a 7th rounder. He goes into the OHL, which is the Ontario Hockey League, with the Peterborough Petes, who are the best team in that league. So he's in the best place possible. He's as an import player, so he's paid a decent bit of money. And I will discuss Kirk in a minute. The fact that he was willing to be drafted, but then go over to the NHL Combine, which is crucial, play very well at the NHL Combine, and go below where he was meant to go in the draft, says he's a draft steal. Liam Kirk is a draft steal. Plus, he's played at the World Championships as an OHL player, which you don't normally do. And he played decently. He got through the World Championships, no injuries. He played again against men with men because he's classed as a still as a junior player under Canadian standards. He played with and against men, so senior level players. He will end up in the ECHL, AHL in a year or so. He may get some time as an NHL player. He's only 19. Where do I think Kirk will end up? Well, he's part of the Arizona Coyotes setup. They put him in development. He went really late in the draft, so he was meant to go 4th round. He went 7th round, so you've got another, that means there's 31 players per round because there's 31 teams. That's 31 draft picks. He's going to go in the 4th round. He goes in the 7th. He was 183rd overall. There were still players behind him. He's still ahead of other players, both North American and European. So he's not the worst player in the draft. And the last year's draft was considered a very deep quality draft class. This year, not so much. So the thing is, he's in the Peterborough Petes system to develop. I think he can stay there. He's got a couple more years there at most. I think the AHL is I think a step above the level which he was playing at. The Elite League is classed more like ECHL, weak AHL kind of level. The AHL is a pretty hard league. It's a top league. It's a tough league. I think he will spend. I think Tucson Roadrunners is probably where he ends up, which is the affiliate of the Arizona Coyotes. I think he ends up there to start his senior career in the North America. I think that's where he'll end up for the majority, is the AHL with the Tucson Roadrunners, and then he can be part of trades. He's still technically Arizona property, even though he hasn't got an entry level contract. He's part of their youth system. He's part of their development system. He's one of their prospect pool. If Arizona were to trade players, he could be one of those players traded and qualified. So we'll see what happens. He's in the prospect system. It is complicated to really go about it, but if you look over here at the European system, we have a club system, not a franchise system. So the youth development starts at a young age in the club that we follow, and it goes up the senior ranks through age levels to the senior level, and then you're in the senior team. You follow Swindon, I follow Bracknell. That's how it works. North America's a franchise system. That's the best way to describe how a draft system works. So I wouldn't be surprised if Liam Kirk-Yellowt, he does play a lengthy period of time. He will come back to Europe to finish his career, I have no doubt. But I think he wants to give North America a shot. He wants to advertise what British players can do. He might get some games in the NHL. He won't be an NHL regular. He was drafted. Although I was saying that, we have seen players drafted in the 7th round who've gone on to be Hall of Fame candidates. Zetterberg is one, and Lundqvist is another. They were 7th round draft picks, so anything's possible. And I think the quality level has improved so much across the board that and the league is growing, so they're going to want to. There's going to be Seattle joining. They're going to have, to set up a AHL and ECHL affiliate system. They're going to have to develop players. So yeah, as the league grows, more players will definitely have to be drafted from not only North America but Europe as well. Who else do I see? The UK player of the UK gets drafted. That I can't really tell you, but I do know that there are some players. I think Bracknell have got the former Lightning goalie who used to play collegiate in America. So there are British players who have played collegiately and in the OHL in America who are playing in the elite. I do think, more young British players are going to get up into the NHL draft in years to come. I think there are a few in the pipeline for a couple of years' time. The Elite League is improving as a league every year. I think there are issues with the Elite League. I think it's not perfect. I think it needs to be a bigger size league. I think they need to look at why the Edinburgh Capitals failed and why Hull haven't been put in and why they've only a 10-team league. But I think the Elite League will grow in size. I think Hull, Peterborough and Bracknell at some point will take that next step. I think the sport will continue to grow in the UK. I think who else do I think gets drafted? I don't know. I think the talent is there. I think the growth in the game is there. The growth in the sport is there. More kids are playing. It's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of years. But I mean, people in North America, they are paying attention to what happens in Europe, because a lot of the players that go into the NHL draft come from Europe. It would be stupid of them to ignore what's happening in the European leagues. It'd be really, really stupid to ignore what's happening in the European leagues and the amount of players being developed. But I don't know. I honestly couldn't tell you what I think. I think, yeah, the issue is with the National League, though, is if you were to take the best teams out of the National League and put them up into the Elite League, the National League would struggle. They also need to look at giving Guildford a rival in the south of England, because they've lost Milton Keynes Lightning from the Elite League. I think Bracknell would be a nice bit there. I think Milton Keynes, at some point, if they had the right ownership, could also get back to the Elite League. Peterborough, a good location, and Hull, and then you could definitely have a fun kind of Elite League, which would have that range of 14 to 16 teams in there. I think it makes it more fun. It means there's more competition for places, more British players playing. Grows the game, but that means the National League and the NIHL National League would have to be completely restructured yet again, and that leads to more issues because of constant changes to structure and uncertainty, which is a big issue that British hockey's had over the years, is the uncertainty of the direction of the sport and what's happening from season to season. Do I think the country needs more rinks and facilities? Well, Leeds have got their brand new rink, and the Leeds Chiefs start their maiden season in a few months. Romford got a new rink. Basingstoke, obviously, the issues on their rink are ongoing. I think some facilities need a refurb, and I'm a Bracknell fan. I'm definitely saying that the slow, steady progress they've made at the rink is good, but they need to really do a bit more than just refurb it. I think they really need to change the seating downstairs into fold down normal seats rather than school benches. I think they need to replace a lot of the seats upstairs that have been damaged. The scoreboard's good. The netting's now up. There's a lot of other stuff they could do, but it's minor compared to what's happening at Basingstoke, where they need a brand new rink. Slough, they refurbed it. It's Planet Ice operates a lot of the rinks in this country. They're the biggest ice rink operator in this country, and that's part of the problem. Part of the issue, and all the teams that seem to be having rink issues or struggling with finances are playing in Planet Ice operated ice rinks. So I think I've summed it up there. Where the problem lies is having one major rink operator over multiple rink operators, and the fact that but I don't know. Leeds' new rink looks good, but it's Planet Ice operated, so how good that lasts, I don't know, and how well that lasts for the Leeds Chiefs and the agreement that they sign at the rink. Invicta having money problems, Milton Keynes as both Lightning and Thunder having issues, all Planet Ice operated. Basingstoke's rink's basically falling down. I could go on and on and on with all the issues with Planet Ice operated rinks in this country, and the way that they're trying to milk as much the financial side of it. They're putting pressure on the teams that bring them customers. Basically, it's mad. Someone said they should have a cup competition with the National League or the old EPAHL and the Elite League. That would be just a slaughter. That wouldn't work. That just puts too many extra games into the calendar, bearing in mind that a lot of the players in the National League are semi-pro, so they also have full-time jobs. It wouldn't work. Swindon put sponsors on the ice for the first time. That's going to be interesting. I know a lot of fans don't like that. But the way it's angled, you've only got one stand, really. So it's angled up to the one stand rather than you have to do it for the whole arena. That could work. But I'm not overly a massive fan of all the on-ice sponsorship. But I know why it's there. It's because it brings in money. We'll see how fans respond to that. The Bracknell technically have the John Knight Leisure Group symbol on the ice, and we have all the advertising hoardings going around on the boards. Interesting. It'll be interesting to see the fans' response to that, because this is the interesting crux. Because when I've been waiting to get my tickets and I've been queuing up for a game, I'm hearing a lot of Canadian and American accents at at games the last couple of years. And yeah, when I go in and I watch a game, I am hearing North American accents at games. They're not a big fan of all the sponsorship on the ice stuff. They don't like it. So I don't know. Interesting. Preseason, preseason is when you want to get your players tuned in, and again, it's to do with cost. You've got to remember cost. One of the reasons why British ice hockey's had issues is the money side of things. And the pre-season, you want to play against your local rivals, just get the fans spiced up for the main stuff to come in the main season. That's what pre-season's about: is getting your players warmed up, get your players ready, but also keep costs down. It's where British ice hockey's gone wrong, is they haven't factored in the cost with some of their ideas in the past. That's why the EIHL National League wouldn't necessarily work. Yeah, the sponsor side of things, some rinks have got it wrong, some have got it right, but it's to do with, online streaming for one. So if you put in the games online, and also if you're trying to get TV companies interested, and bear in mind the way the Swindon rink is shaped with the one stand, basically the one-sided rink, you're going to have everyone looking at your eyes at that right angle. So I can see why it would work in Swindon, but I'm not overly sold on everyone doing it. I can see it becoming an ongoing trend, but that means the cost of resurfacing the ice every year as well is something that a lot of rinks or operators don't want to do necessarily. Yeah, it is one of them. But again, it is what it is. A lot of older school fans don't even like the advertising hoardings on the boards. On the boards, they don't like the adverts on the boards. So you're not going to get everyone on board. I think it clutters the ice up, and when you're trying to actually watch the game and work out what's offside, where's the face-off dot, things like that. I just like to be able to watch the game without having to try and pick through advertising, slogans to figure out where the puck is or where the play is happening. It takes your eye off what you want to watch. But that's my personal opinion. I mean, I that's why I prefer watching the NHL to a point, because there's limited advertising in the center, and then it's not everywhere. And I've heard a lot of people, especially North Americans, really going, "Why do you have all this sponsorship on your jerseys?" And to keep the teams going is reliant. I mean, I have to admit, it doesn't look particularly nice having tons of sponsors on a jersey, but I suppose as Europeans and as Brits, we're used to it. Whereas the North Americans in their sports, they just roundly reject having it. Apart from Major League Rugby and Major League Soccer, they really don't like having all the sponsors all over the place. But it's a cultural thing, I think, with that kind of aspect of looking at sponsorship of sports teams and where the sponsors place their logos. It's a cultural thing with the North American thing. I think we're more open to the aspect of having sponsors on jerseys and sponsors on things like that. 3-year contract for a year. Well, I mean, it's not going to be the amount of money that you're going to get in the higher level sports, is it? But we'll have to see how our fans react to it and how they feel, and what benefits it brings and the negatives, and then at the end of the season or at the end of the agreement, you figure out all the pros and cons. It is what it is. That could be a sign that, hey, bigger things are to come. If they can get that TV revenue, you never know. The important thing is being able to put a team on the ice and play a game. That's the important thing when it comes to British ice hockey, and we're seeing, the sport grow massively. But you've got to, when a sport grows, it's got to be sustainable growth, and that's where it went wrong in the past with unsustainable growth, and then it sort of went wrong. It needs to be sustainable, controlled growth. That's the best way for a sport to grow the base, and then it will be sustainable long term. Sponsorship helps, no doubt. But when I go through my jersey, I mean, I've sent jerseys to a fellow YouTuber who's a pen pal of mine, and I send him stuff, and he's worn on my jersey and goes, "This is why we don't like. This is what we fear with the Adidas agreement with the NHL, was all the advertising. It's hideous. It's ugly, and it's a cultural thing with sponsorship. It really, really is. massive cultural thing. But it's here to stay. It's not going to go away. But it is what it is. Am I looking forward to the new season? Yes. Yes, I am. But I'm moving at some point in the next 3 to 6 months. So I'll actually be moving closer to the Slough rink than the Rattle rink. But I am looking forward to the new season. Absolutely. It's going to be kind of fun. Oh yeah, I mean, I don't want Planet Ice to ever have. I mean, Planet Ice tried to buy the Bracknell Ice rink, and I'm so glad they didn't. Even with the issues that the John Nike has, I'm so glad they didn't, because the negative press when you have Planet Ice associated with an ice hockey team in the UK, you know the answer that at some point that team is going to have problems with their agreement for ice time. Look at Milton Keynes; it's just there to be a problem. But the Elite League is growing massively. There is a fan base here. The TV deal is a good starting point with Premier Sport, Free Sports. I think they've got the right kind of TV coverage there. And Great Britain's success at the World Championships, the North American teams, the North American hockey fan is going to look at the Elite League, going to look at the Italian league. They're going to look at these nations that weren't expected to put up a fight, and we did. And look from there. Swearingen, Bracknell, Hull, Swindon, Raiders. I think Hull, yeah, that's privately owned. Bracknell's privately owned. Swindon. The Raiders, yeah, they got their Sapphire Ice, I believe. But the Elite Planet Ice is trying to basically get a monopoly on all the ice rinks. I think that's actually against competition rules as well for ice rink opera. But Basingstoke now, it's not owned by Planet Ice. It's not operated anymore by Planet Ice. They are out. They are out. They have no longer got operational rights. There are some council. Streatham is a council operated rink in Streatham in London. That's run by the local council. I know that much. I've been there. They've Streatham's rink is council operated, and it's actually really nice. It's really nice in there. It's a good ice surface. It's a good facility. It's a beautiful facility, actually. Very easy to get to. No, it's council operated though, under license. And Streatham, it's a beautiful little rink, and it's the same design as Swindon, ironically, one-sided, which I find really, really ironic. But no, the way what they've done there, it's great. It's literally right by the train station. You work out the train station, you go right out the station, just past the Tesco's, and you're there. I mean, it's not in the nicest location in London, because it's technically, it is basically what the Link Centre should look like if it was refurbed properly. But it's what they've done there is absolutely stunning. With the space they've used, they've done a really, really good job, and it's very nice. And the Raiders rink, Sapphire Ice, looks pretty good as well. I'm not going to lie from there. I think that's what they've done and how they built that, and the time it took as well. Yeah, I think Lee Valley is I think the Lee Valley Ice Arena is another council operated one. Chelmsford, I think that's. I think Chelmsford's not owned by Planet Ice. There are some that aren't owned by Planet Ice. Let's just put it out there. Planet Ice doesn't own every single ice sheet in this country. Leeds is gonna look like Peterborough and Basingstoke. What Basingstoke would have looked like had it not been falling down. It's just a modern version of Peterborough's, basically, with the same kind of seating plan, because they use the same people every time, just with more modern materials, and hopefully it doesn't fall down. Think of what the layout of Basingstoke was before it all started falling apart. That's pretty much what Leeds will look like, but it's going to be new and not broken. Basically, that's the layout it will have. It will have technically three, it'll have stands. It'll be very similar to Peterborough's. It'll be very, very similar to every other Planet Ice operated rink. They have a very similar layout inside for some reason. And I hope Leeds do very well. I really do. But a lot of British ice hockey here. But I think with the success that the Great Britain team have had, and the fact, Harringate, spelled that way wrong, because it's basically a Huskies place. I think their ring is weird, but I might call it at the same time. Harrogate Huskies, I think. Are you trying to say? Or, Haringey. That's the Lee Valley. Is Haringey. That's Lee Valley Ice, whatever it is. look, at the same time, look, it is what it is. Slough is council-operated rink in Slough, the Hangar, as it's called, and I've been to Slough rink before. The local councils do operate a lot around. I think that's. I think we have discussed a bit too much hockey. You asked about the NHL draft and how it worked, and we've ended up with British ice hockey again. The NHL draft is basically there because it's a franchise-based system, not a club-based system. If it was a club-based system, they would have their own youth pools that they would develop up to senior level. But you were asking about how it works. It's sort of like how it works. The thing is, it's the youth players are developed by a different league, and then they get drafted in if they're good enough. You can go to NHL, be an undrafted player. You can just sign a contract as a free agent and come over. So you're asking what British players in the pipeline. There are British players that I think are draft eligible. I think scouts will be looking more at the British League now. And I would not be surprised with the amount of North Americans that have come over to play here, and the links that they have with the NHL, the AHL, the ECHL, things like that. I wouldn't be surprised if more scouts are looking at elite league games in the next couple of seasons, and maybe even looking down at the National League as well, because that's the developmental league for the elite league. So they're going to be looking at British ice hockey more. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, but that is a given. What else am I looking at? Let's go through my notes quickly. The amount of I've had this notebook now for how many? I've had notes. Back to the Six Nations. So Six Nations round 5. That's like before Easter. That's like 3-4 months ago. So my notebook's getting full. I need a new one. I'll just flip it over and use the back of the sheets. Now, England playing Cameroon, and we started the live stream and we discussed VAR. So VAR and the review process there, the video assistant referee, has FIFA got its implementation wrong? Yeah. That's discussing something else that isn't hockey related. The game kicks off at 4:30, so 5:30 local time in France. It's going to be a good game, I think. I think England, if they can get clicking and get going, they can score a lot of goals. I think if they get it right. If they get it wrong, dreaded penalties. But we're not discussing how good the football's been or the improved quality of the women's game. We're discussing the VAR. Had this been last year in the World Cup, in the Men's World Cup, with these rule variations they brought in experimental rules, the outcry would have been such that FIFA, it would kill the VAR concept. I think VAR is being not used correctly. It's the best way to describe that. Right, what other? England, Cameroon rivalry. Oh God, I think I'm hoping the game isn't overshadowed by the video ref, the VAR. If VAR gives a controversial decision or it's decided by a VAR decision, that otherwise, is that player interfering on offside? Is that a penalty? Is there encroachment off the penalty? Something like that. The FIFA will be in a very tough. FIFA already in a tough spot with telling teams that the encroachment rule for goalkeepers in knockout stage penalty shootouts has been scrapped. We got through one penalty shootout last night, but that game was decided by VAR as well. I think as football fans, if this was to happen, I think VAR should be there to correct mistakes, but the officials shouldn't be relying on the video ref to fix all their problems. That's basically what's happening. Is the officials are being very conservative in their decisions, and they're afraid to give that controversial decision. Let the video do it. Let the machine do it, which is technically a humanoid behind a computer. It's a human at a laptop going, is that a penalty? And it also depends on the interpretation of what the referee has upstairs, which will be different to the referee on the pitch. And we can keep going on about this, but if the two games today, especially the England Cameroon game, is decided by VAR, actually, I'm going to quickly check what the other game is because I haven't discussed the other game which is taking place today, and that's really stupid of me. Let's have a look at the BBC Sport website. Let's get online. Oh, it's France-Brazil. I mean, crikey, it's the host versus Brazil in the second game. I mean, crikey, if it's France-Brazil 8:00 tonight UK time. Christ, I mean, if France are knocked out because of a VAR decision, or France-Brazil was probably the biggest game of the tournament so far. If that's decided by VAR and VAR screws up, Christ, think of the reaction. There's a reason why they chose the Women's World Cup to experiment with all these rules rather than the Men's World Cup. Yes, they used VAR last year, but we knew going into the tournament a few years before that VAR was going to be used because domestic leagues were trialling it in cup, friendly and league competitions. In the women's game, there hasn't been any trialling of VAR in the women's game. None. They're doing it now, and they're screwing it up. And I think I wouldn't go Brie, I'll go Camembert. No, if the hosts get knocked out because of VAR, that in itself will create massive controversy. The FIFA are playing a very dangerous game because next year at the Euros, which is not actually hosted by one single country but the whole of Europe, but Euro 2020, if this is to happen in a major men's tournament next year, good God, think of the consequences. I know you've got the Africa Cup of Nations and you've got the Copa America taking place right now, but they're Copa America to a point. The stadiums are basically empty in Africa, and Copa America, they're having to invite teams from outside of the South America to participate to even up the groups. I mean, that just shows something there. Europe is where the major sports market is. If in Euro 2020 we have the same controversy in the men's game as in this Women's World Cup, VAR is dead. They will scrap it, which will actually take the game backwards even further, because I do believe that there is a reason why VAR is there. It's not been correctly implemented. Did FIFA engage with other sports and other federations about the use of video officiating in sport? Probably not. It's FIFA. The amount of money FIFA has, why wasn't it not spent on this tech 20 years ago when other sports were doing so? Seriously, you have to ask that question. And yeah, if France-Brazil was decided by a VAR decision, or even England-Cameroon, because the history of English football and FIFA, the negativity is going to be there. The press are going to be after them again. The public reaction is you're trying to sell the game to more people. People are getting annoyed with football to a point. They're not happy with the pricing of tickets, locations of tournaments, locations of finals. Big reaction against the governing bodies for the Europa League final. Big reaction for the price of tickets for Champions League games, TV rights. Football needs to get this right. FIFA needs to get this right. If they get it wrong in these two games today, especially the France-Brazil game, I completely forgot that was the second game. The reaction of fans will be such that FIFA will be in a real tight, backed into a corner. And next year in the Euros, which is a UEFA tournament but follows FIFA's rules, UEFA and FIFA and CONCACAF and the various federations will be on the back foot. If they get it wrong, it damages the sport more. VAR, I think, has to be here to work, but it's not being implemented correctly. And whoever came up with the basic principle is a genius, but whoever's implementing it is a moron. But FIFA, Christ, they're so lucky. I think the FIFA are lucky it's happened this year in the women's game than in the men's World Cup last year. If it happened last year in the men's game, that would have caused riots. I have no doubt, and I really, yeah. 3 teams promoted to the Premier League, doing well as Wolves. Tough one. Aston Villa. It's going to be interesting to see how Aston Villa do. Personally, I think Norwich. They've been a yo-yo team. It's going to be interesting to see how they adapt. Personally, but we'll have to see what happens. Wolves. It's part to do with a bit of money, but also some really good management, player development, and the right and good transfer scouting. That's what it is. We'll see what happens. The proof's in the pudding. Norwich have been a yo-yo team. Aston Villa had declined so badly they had to have a birth of some renewal, but Villa have got issues off the field with money. They almost went to administration 12 months ago, so they're in a position where they have to stay up. If they don't, they're in serious trouble financially. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with those two big, those two especially with Norwich and Villa. That's going to be where the proof in the pudding is with those two clubs. Wolves, it's called good sound management of the football club. Good sound management of the football club. Good scouting, good coaching, good philosophy, and a bit of money. Bit of money helps, and that's the problem. Is you need money now. It's not just like putting a team together out of good, hardworking team players, local community. You also need to have a couple of $100 million million as a minimum just to get mid-table. Now this is where the problem lies, is the money side of things, and clubs overstretching themselves. Aston Villa is a prime example of that. We'll have to see what happens in the transfer market this summer. We have to see who gets signed, who gets sold. Managerial changes because managers are getting sacked and standing down, and a whole host of things. So it's going to be interesting going forward. What's going to happen in the next weeks? But we'll see what happens with the teams that got relegated and the teams that got promoted. We'll have to see what happens. And quarter later of the season, the first international break, then over Christmas, then second international break, and then the end of the season. We'll have to look at in the quarters of the season as the season goes, who ends up where. But I think it's too early to say yet. Let's just enjoy the fact there's some international football on, and then a bit of a break in August from all the and July about all the discussion about who's going where, and just have a bit of a break from football because it dominates. It dominates the sports press in the UK, at least. I'm not so sure about the sports press in Australia, but it dominates the sports narrative in this country is Premier League, and there are other sports happening, and there are other stories happening, and it's just not being covered. But then we've got the Rugby Union World Cup, and then Rugby Union's got its own issues, and Rugby League has got its own problems, and we'll see what happens. I think we'll see what happens going forward. But a lot of fans are getting frustrated with football as a sport, its governance, ticket pricing, TV rights, price for a replica shirt. I mean, that's gone through the roof. A whole host of issues. Player wages are out of control. Transfers overinflated. Managerial turnaround is it's becoming a circus now. And I think football is reaching a point where it's becoming unsustainable for even big clubs with big money. They're struggling to sustain themselves. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. There's a whole load of rumours about Neymar. Will he stay at PSG? Will he want to leave PSG? We'll see what happens in the next few months. But it's technically the team's off seasons now. So let's just enjoy the summer, or in this case, the winter in Australia. Let's just enjoy the summer. Let's have some non-footballing sport to look at, like the Super League, like the NRL, like Wimbledon and Queens, because there's tennis taking place. Let's actually enjoy other sports stories. The Tour de France, if you like cycling. Let's actually go. There's some other stuff out there. There's some other things to enjoy. While I love international football, I think club football's got problems, and I'm not hiding from that. I think it's unsustainable at club level, and if club level football goes tits up, which I think it's getting close to, it cannot be sustained the way it is, and I don't know what happens going forward in the next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. I don't know. State of origin Perth. I don't know what the time zone difference between Perth and the East Coast is. I think it's like 4 or 5 hours or something. Look, that's a statement of intent from the NRL that they are putting a showpiece event like that in the Rugby League calendar in Western Australia. That is a statement. And even if it's 3 hours, surely the TV listings would have told you. Just keep flicking on the Fox Footy from AFL to NRL and just see what comes up. Just keep pressing the buttons. I would honestly just spam the TV remote. But look on your Fox box. I don't know. We have a Sky box here. So, well, I don't personally, but my mate does, and you can put a reminder on for a channel. So I'm sure it's just getting used to the fact that it's not on the East Coast. I think it is a statement of intent, though, from the NRL. We discussed it earlier. I do honestly think it's a statement of intent from the NRL saying that we're having a game in Perth of such massive magnitude that isn't a standard NRL game on the road with Sydney Rabbitohs or the Canterbury Bulldogs. We are putting a statement of intent where we are placing a game in Perth. I think that's a signal for a couple of years down the line that the NRL is going to have a team in Perth. I honestly believe that they are looking at expanding to an 18-team league, I think, and you will see a team in Perth. But that's what it, that is what it is. I mean, the principle of having a team in Melbourne was to get more people in the state of Victoria playing rugby league. But I think looking at the amount of players from the state of Victoria playing in the NRL? There's not many that I can think of, if any. So growing the grassroots level in the area you put a team is vital as well. It's not just putting a team there and making the money. It's also growing the game at grassroots level locally and getting those young players good enough to get to the NRL as well. That's another key factor that I think needs to be addressed by the NRL, is getting players playing in the state of Victoria at a good enough level that they can actually enter the NRL. There's not many Victorians playing in NRL that I can think of. But that's another debate for another day. Yeah, the Perth Pirates, I think that's a good name. But, you know, it is what it is. I think right now, I think we'll just have to see the result of State of Origin too. And if Queensland win it, then that's going back to Queensland, isn't it? But the fact they are choosing Perth, that is a statement of intent. But I've been talking about this for 2 years now. That I think, I think it would actually. It's a statement of intent from the rugby league in Australia that they want to have a top NRL team in Perth, that they're playing State of Origin there. That's a personal opinion. Plus, there's no home advantage for either side. It's a neutral ground, and the fans in Perth always show up for rugby league games. They always have, and they will continue. The World Cup, they did. Perth, they show up for sport, and they are undervalued as a city when it comes to putting sports teams at the professional level in Australia. But that's a debate for another day. These headphones are so bloody uncomfortable. But no, yeah, it would be an apt name for such a nautical place. But there's so many teams that have the word pirate in there that someone's copyrighted somewhere. But we'll have to see what happens with ongoing with rugby league in Western Australia. But I think that is a statement of intent by the NRL and New South Wales and Queensland Rugby League and the Rugby League Commission to put the game there. It's an intent from the governing bodies to grow the game there going forward. Massive intent. And I think the sports community in Perth has been felt let down by the governing bodies of the sports. They felt let down by Rugby Union and Super Rugby. They felt let down by Rugby Australia. They are very critical. So for Rugby League to go, we'll support professional sport in Perth. It's a good starting point. I think that's the direction they're going to go. But I wouldn't say the Perth Plank Walkers is that bad. There are worse ones I could come up with, but I'm just not. But no, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Perth and in State of Origin aside. The crowd, I'm looking at the crowd, how many people turn up just to watch good quality rugby league, let alone supporting Queensland, New South Wales, just to look at the attendance. That's going to be the proof in the pudding. If they can sell out a game between Queensland and New South Wales in Western Australia, that's a good sign. If they can sell out the stadium when you've got all the jerseys, all the teams. Worst team, Washington Redskins in the NFL. Blackhawks, I think Chicago can get away with that in the NHL. Washington Redskins in the NFL is pretty bad. Trying to have a think now. Vancouver Canucks is a pretty bad one because Canuck is a derogatory term for a Canadian, but Vancouver's in Canada, so that's an ironic one. Yeah, Redskins are also type of lolly. That's an Australian thing though, so I don't know. I'm trying to think now. There are some pretty bad sports team names, but I can't really. There's a team called the Cottonmouths, but that's based on a species of rattlesnake, so they get away with that, even though there are some slave connotations with slavery in the US with that one. There's Oilers is pretty. I wouldn't say the Oilers is that bad. It's a link to the community. What the community of Edmonton's about with the Oilers, and the irony of the Calgary Flames being. No, I wouldn't say the Mighty Ducks was the worst name in sports. It's the most iconic logo, I think, of the '90s in sports. I think the Anaheim Ducks is just a pretty. Their logo is horrific, and the name, I think, go back to Mighty Ducks of Anaheim. It just made more sense because Disney owned the team. But there are some pretty bad ones out there. I'm just trying to think. I'm trying to think, and it's really hard to think on the spot. But there are some bad ones. There are some really bad ones. Young boys, Bern. Young boys in Switzerland in football. Young boys of Bern. Oh, that's a cringe one. Grasshoppers of Zurich. That's another bad one as well. That I find like really strange. I wouldn't say it's bad, but Zurich Grasshoppers in the football. Young boys, Bern. Yep, Slingers. That's. I wouldn't say that's a bad one. I would just say it's not the best. Not the best. It's not bad. Not the best. There are some bad ones. I've got to think now. I'm trying. I'm trying to think, and it's really, really difficult. The Basingstoke Bison used to be called the Basingstoke Beavers. So there's a good one. There was a team called the Beavers once. If you don't know what a beaver is in slang, you just deserve to be shot. State of Origin game 2. I think New South Wales, the selection issues that they are having is distracting from what is the ultimately from the available players they could select from, a more talented crop of players. But it could be a draw. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I think that the issues are the halfbacks for New South Wales, and I think they've got the selection of those halfbacks wrong. So I think that's what's going to decide it is the halfback selection for New South Wales. Either they step up to the plate or they implode. That's basically my assessment on Origin 2. It wasn't the Eager Beavers. It was something a bit more of a growler. Worst sports names. There are so many I could discuss of worst sports names. I'm trying to think now. Yes, Australia are out the World Cup, and it was a penalty shootout. But they played decently. I think their game against Brazil is going to be the best game that they've played in a long time. But the issue with Australia's women's side is there's an issue with sports governance in Australia and development of players and where the money's coming from and a whole host of issues. And the fact that most of the Australians don't play in Australia domestically says the domestic league needs massive improvement. Tampa Bay, I would say, look, oh God, there are some pretty bad ones in the NFL. But there's some bad ones in the NBA as well. But the LA Lakers, there is no lake in LA. They were moved. You've got the Clippers. So you're getting clipped. I don't know. I would say the NFL, there's some... there are some bad ones. Utah Jazz. There is no Jazz played in Utah. Come on. They should be Utah Mormons, more like. The Utah Jazz is a head-scratcher for me. Memphis Grizzlies. There's another one for you. There's no Grizzly Bears living in Memphis, Tennessee. Oh yeah, the Detroit Pistons isn't exactly friendly or gun control, but that's designed basically because it's a motor industry, the piston of a car. But no, the malice in the palace is remembered because of the Detroit Pistons. God, there are some bad ones. There are some the Arizona. I don't know what it is with Cardinals and sports teams being called the Cardinals in the US. I know there's a bird called a cardinal, but looking at the Catholic Church right now and what cardinals are doing in the Catholic Church, it's a little bit of a sticky one. The Raptors, I don't know. I think it's growing on me, but the fact that you've got a dinosaur as a logo is just weird. It's like they ran out of names. But Toronto is such a, the Major League Rugby, the Toronto Arrows. Okay. Cool. Arrow. Yeah. They're running out. I swear, some of these teams are running out of names because you've got the Cottonmouths in the ECHL. You've got the Rail Yard Dogs. Oh God, the Pelicans. Yeah, they're terrible. Carolina Panthers and the Panthers Black. You know, like Black Panther. So, oh God, there are some pretty bad names, I have to admit. But the two worst ones I can think of are the Grasshoppers Zurich and Young Boys Bern in the Swiss Football League. I mean, I'm scratching my head at them. But Pelicans is pretty bad. Piston. I would say the Detroit Pistons because it's car related. So you have to think of the location of Detroit, and every single Detroit team has something car related. Yeah, the Cleveland Browns, they named their team after their former coach. Yeah, Cleveland Browns, named after their former coach. Cincinnati Bengals. There are some bad. I mean, I'm trying to think of some really bad ones now. Some of the logos are pretty horrific. Kansas City Chiefs, they've Arrowhead Stadium. They've gone with the Native American, but looking at the positive, where they look at the history rather than the Redskins with Washington. But no, we're now getting on to really obscure stuff. I mean, last live stream we talked about obscure football players, and now we're talking about obscure team names that are Buffalo Bills. Anything to do with Buffalo? I mean, Buffalo. Anything to do with the city of Buffalo, Major League Sports, is failure. Look at the Sabres. Anything to do with Buffalo in sports is just failure. But no, Bill's ice cream. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's what it is. I mean, Buffalo though is a byword for failure when it comes. The Oakland Raiders. There's one for you. The Oakland Raiders. Now they're moving to Vegas, and what they're going to call them? They're going to change the name, or they're going to keep the name? The Oakland Raiders. They have the worst fan base, and yeah. The Philadelphia Eagles, I think, does that work? It sort of does. I don't know. There's some really odd ones for team names, but what do I know? I think the worst team name I can think of is Grasshopper or Young Boys, because that's just weird. But that's my personal opinion. It's like anything to do with Red Bull. It's a big thing in Germany and Austria having Red Bull teams, isn't it? Like Red Bull Leipzig, Red Bull Salzburg, Red Bull Munich. It's just, that annoys the hell out of me, but it is what it is. But then you got, like, you know, Eastern Europe, Dynamo just becomes a team name. You know, the Washington Wizards. I forgot that they were hopeless at basketball, and they're still going aimlessly. But I don't know how we've got some teams be called PlayStations. That would be copyrighted. You can't have that because Sony. But I think, yeah, at some point you are running out of, like, team names. There's going to be a point where they're like, we've run out of names to put with this team to make it sound fun. That's why I'm a bit surprised they went with Leeds Chiefs with the ice hockey in the UK. I'm surprised they didn't come up with another team name like a Yorkshire Miner or Sheffield's already got the Steelers. They can't go with that. It's going to be interesting to see how. Yeah, some of the team logos I scratch my head at. Like, who designs the logo? Like, I do scratch my head going, who designed that logo? Did they pay a child to draw it? How much did they pay the graphic designer to come up with this logo? Some of the jerseys as well need to be looked at. I think some of them are hideous. I think the Mighty Ducks, it's iconic though. That jersey, that logo is iconic. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of kids in the UK got into ice hockey was the Mighty Ducks film. Outsourced the design on Reddit, probably. But I think logo designing and kit design can go a long way into creating a fan base and getting the fan base, you know, really into the team. You know, it's an interesting one. I think some kits and jerseys are absolutely iconic for all time, and some are remembered for all the wrong reasons because of how ugly they were. I can remember the Liverpool away kit in '96 being green and white halves. It was hideous, absolutely disgusting. The treble winning third kit of Man United, the silvery grey sharp Viacom jersey was grim. And then Man City had the iconic black and red, AC Milan style stripes when George Weah was playing. So, there are some really iconic kits, and there's some really I've never seen the A-League trophy, but I know it's a pretty hideous looking thing. It's not an attractive looking piece of silverware. There are some. It's like the Stanley Cup is an iconic trophy, absolutely iconic. The Champions League, formerly European Champions Cup, iconic trophy. The shape of it. The World Cup that we see now in the men's game is not quite the Jules Rimet of 1970 that Pele got his hands on. They gave to Brazil after they won their third World Cup, but that's iconic. The Webb Ellis Trophy in rugby union, they are iconic pieces of silverware. The old UEFA Cup, now the Europa League, that is just the biggest trophy in professional sports for weight. It's the biggest trophy going in sport. It's huge. The Europa League trophy is massive compared to other trophies. It's not the biggest. I think there's a bigger one. I think it's the Italian Supercoppa trophy, or the Italian League Cup trophy is massive. There are some massive trophies though out there. I think the League Cup trophy in the UK is tiny. In England, it's tiny. Absolutely piddly little thing. The World Series, that's an ugly trophy. The NRL trophy they give out is pretty ugly and all. I don't know what it is with some of the awards they give out in sport, but some of them are absolutely shockingly bad. They're hideous, and others are iconic with what the sport represents. So the Stanley Cup being what it is possibly the most well-travelled and beautiful trophies there is. The Ashes, the original Ashes trophy is about that big. It is iconic. It's about that big. But the actual little trophy they give out now to go with it is a bit bigger. There is a bigger version of the Ashes trophy. That's a glass vase they give out. But no, the actual Ashes is about, it's about, I would say, that big. It's about 4 inches, 3 inches tall, about that wide. It's probably the smallest sports trophy that a team will compete for. Absolutely. I don't like the Super League trophy in the Rugby League. I think it's just as grotty as the NRL's trophy. I think they're designed by the same people. I like the Challenge Cup. That's a proper trophy. I like. There are some trophies that are just transcend iconic. The Rugby Union, Webb Ellis, the Jules Rimet, the FA Cup, the League Cup to a point is a nice looking trophy. It's just not as historic. Champions League trophy. There are some iconic trophies, and there's some really ugly ones. Really ugly. That you got to question who designed that. Yeah. I think the men's Wimbledon trophy is pretty much, I think, designed by the same person who designed, or the same design company for years and years and years that designed the Webb Ellis. I think they based the Webb Ellis design off the Wimbledon trophy to a point, because it looks very, very similar from a distance, although it's Webb Ellis is smaller. The claret jug, that's for the Open. That's historical because of what, obviously, they used to put claret in there, and it wasn't actually jug. The Calcutta Cup, the Triple Crown, that's pretty nice. The Triple Crown's nice. The Calcutta Cup's nice. The German Bundesliga shield looks like a shield that you would actually have in a medieval hall somewhere in Bavaria. That looks quite nice. And then there are some really, really hideous trophies out there. But look, at the end of the day, I don't think you can beat the Stanley Cup. Maybe the Champions League trophy, maybe the FA Cup final. Some of the cup finals and then World Cups, Webb Ellis, possibly. But I can see what you mean. But it's one of them where they now can't keep extending the length of the trophy. They have to take bands out and put them in the Hockey Hall of Fame. So, but it's not actually as heavy as people think it is. It's nowhere near as heavy as the Europa League final trophy or the Europa League trophy. What was the UEFA Cup? It's not as heavy as the Champions League trophy. It's surprisingly light. For the size of it, it's not as heavy as people think that the trophy is. It's an interesting one, but it's probably one of the most iconic trophies in sports, alongside the Champions League trophy, which was formerly the UEFA, not the UEFA Cup, not the Cup Winners' Cup, the Champions Cup. European Champion Cup Winners, got Cup Winners' Cup, which is gone now. That's in the history vault. But no, the Europa League trophy, which is the old UEFA Cup, that's always been the same. That's a big one. But there's loads of trophies that you want to get your hands on, and you have to look historically at what the trophies look like. And some team sports, they have some really, really good trophies to get your hands on in various domestic competitions. I think the North American Pro Leagues, apart from the Stanley Cup, the NHL, have got their trophies wrong. They look absolutely hideous. The Lombardi Trophy isn't a trophy; it's just a big block of metal, really. I can understand why it's iconic because I haven't changed it in 50 years, but I'm not a big fan of the Lombardi Trophy. I don't think it looks nice. The Super Bowl, it looks grim. But you only play like 20 games to get it, whereas some other competitions you play a lot. The Women's World Cup trophy doesn't look bad though. I think that looks quite decent for what they've got. It's a different version of the Men's World Cup. I like the Women's World Cup one. I like the European Football Trophy for the Euros. That's an iconic piece of silverware. But yeah, not all of them are very good. I will admit the World Series is hideous. The NBA Finals, I'm not sold on at all. Major League Soccer, I have no comment on because I haven't really seen it. Major League Baseball, yeah, the World Series is grim, absolutely grim. It's hideous. The World Series, absolutely hideous. But at the end of the day, that it's the iconic moments of certain sporting. I think certain sports they have more iconic moments because of the trophy, but more trophies are photogenic as well. Stanley Cup is one of them. It's just it transcends, I think, generations. I think you see a photograph of a player lifting it, and you know what year that was with that player because it's just such an iconic thing that sticks in your memory. But some trophies look absolutely grim, and some of the trophy designers, Jesus. But it is what it is, and some of these trophies are worth a lot of money, and some of them are pretty cheap and tacky. But it is what it is. I think the NRL has a decent trophy at the end. I think it is decent. It could be better, but it's historical, so it has the same significance for rugby league fans as the Challenge Cup does. And yeah, the Stanley Cup comes with Gary Bettman getting booed. Absolutely. And talking of Gary Bettman, he takes it very well, and with good humour, even though he's very unpopular. But he does say this: if I'm not getting booed, I'm not doing my job correctly. And he's right. The issue that the NHL now has is the ongoing talks about the collective bargaining agreement and what happens if the NHLPA opts out on September the 15th. That's the date that you want to look out for, is September the 15th. Don't worry about free agency. Don't worry about trades in the summer. September the 15th, NHLPA opt out. If the NHLPA stays in, that says we're not going to have a lockout or a strike. That kills off any calls for a strike or lockout. September the 15th. If you are an NHL fan, check out that date. When that date passes and the NHLPA are still in for the collective bargaining agreement, signs are good. And even if they do opt out, that doesn't mean that a new agreement can't be thrashed out, because they're having ongoing talks and have done for several seasons now. They're preparing for the next collective bargain. They're preparing to get things right. I think the big sticking point for the players is escrow, which I discussed. It's a very complex system. Other sticking points are Olympic participation and revenue sharing. On the NHL side of things, they don't want to lock out. They've got Seattle coming in. They want to make as much money as possible. So what the NHL want to do is make sure that revenue sharing is taken off the table, but escrow is resolved to a 50-50 level. And Olympic participation, it's more to do with the IOC and the NHL disagreeing rather than the IIHF. They allow NHL players to play at the World Championship, so Olympic participation is doable if the NHL and the IOC can sit around a table and discuss certain image issues and payments for player insurance. But escrow is the big sticking point, and that's where a lot of high-profile players are talking about escrow. The players that are on smaller contracts are hit hardest, and that needs to be resolved, because if escrow in its current format is not resolved, you're going to have players refusing to play. They're going to go, hang on a second, this is not right. And for once, I'm on the side of the players. Plus, the NHLPA does have more say now than what it did, I would say, at the last two lockouts, because the NHLPA is bigger. There are more teams, there's more players. The NHLPA has gained in, I wouldn't say power, but influence, because more players are now registered with the NHLPA, so they have a bigger voice. And the NHL cannot ignore the fact that if they want to continue growing, they're going to have to listen to their employees and say, hang on a second, we might have got this wrong. There are other sticking points as well, such as post-player insurance for health costs, so post-retirement healthcare and pension pot. But escrow is the big sticking point. How much does that have to do with the potential TV rights? Look, TV rights get regularly renewed. It's an ongoing thing with TV rights. The NHL also would like to avoid a lockout, because it is bad for when it comes to the negotiating table with the media companies that will, stream games online for you if you have to pay off free streaming, TV rights, a whole host of things. Media selling TV rights outside of North America. So over here in the UK, we have Free Sports and Premier Sports, where we can watch the NHL. In Europe, it will be up to the host broadcaster if they want to show games. It does make it difficult with potential TV rights agreements or selling of media rights, be it on the NHL, EA Sports games, or 2K games. So the image rights of those players, even hockey cards. That was the first hockey strike. Came down to image rights of hockey cards and sticker books. The players were like, we're not getting the percentage of revenues we should get from our merchandise, and that has carried on throughout up to the present day. Is image rights. Now it's more to do with contract rights and revenue sharing, because the NHL, again, image rights, they make a lot of money off the NHL EA series and 2K series video games. They make a lot of money selling the rights of the images of the players to the game developers of 2K and EA to make those sports games. Yeah, players want to have a bigger share of that revenue. That's part of where the revenue streams come from for teams, is merchandise. So shirt sales, hat sales, scarves, T-shirts, foam hands. Yeah, anything which has NHL and the team's name or the player's name, that's revenue. With Vegas joining and the amount of interest in Vegas gear. I've got Vegas gear, but it took me 6 months to get it because they didn't have it in stock. Big interest. TV rights is part of it. They bid for the right to have. They pay money. So look, we'll pay you money. We'll see what happens, but TV rights is a big thing, because if with Seattle joining, that's going to be a new TV market to regional rights with, and let's say Fox Sports, for example, or NBC or ESPN, or whatever the TV company is that covers Seattle, and they come in, they're going to want to. AT&T probably will pick up the rights they did with Vegas. That's going to be a hard bargain to agree. If there's a lockout beforehand, the TV market might be going, we're going to offer you less money to host the games then. And yeah, that's where there's not a universal TV rights package for every game on multiple carriers. It varies, and the same with the Canadian market as well. You've got TSN has local regional coverage, and Sportsnet has national. And Hockey Night in Canada, that's a big debate in Canada. It's a big thing. It shows that it's a risky bet. because of the unrest. They sign a package and can only show half the games. They've signed up for something they can't broadcast. It does put off potential broadcasters, absolutely. On the same token, the NHL doesn't want to lock out because of that, because of Seattle joining. The NHLPA, they're growing in strength. They know when Seattle joins, they get even bigger. They have a bigger voice because they've got more members, and which means they can, escrow. I think escrow is the sticking point. I think the players will be more flexible in Olympic participation because we're so far out from the Olympics. More flexible on revenue sharing because I know this is probably the last expansion. Relocation fees are so much less. And the fact that the NHL has been very averse to expansion and relocation since the late 90s, very averse since 2000. They've moved one team in the last 20 years, and that was Atlanta because they had no choice. They've stuck with Carolina. They've stuck with Arizona in those locations. They're not moving them. They've stuck with Dallas, even though Dallas won a Stanley Cup. They've stuck with Nashville, even though Nashville almost went bust. They have stuck with teams that have struggled. And Arizona got a new owner coming in, billionaire, wants to keep the team there. Carolina, London, conference final, attendance up. Arizona, attendance up. Nashville, sellout. Dallas, back in the playoffs. They're not going to move these teams. The only sticking point now is Florida in the southern markets and Ottawa in the Canadian market. They're the two that are most likely to be moved out. But at the same time, the lease in Florida, 20-year lease, they're not moving. Ottawa, it's Eugene Melnyk. The Quebec fans want a team back in Quebec. Not going to happen. Market's too small. So it's all FUBAR, but the NHL doesn't want to move teams if they can avoid it because they've now, with Seattle joining, got the conferences nice and balanced, the divisions nice and balanced. They do not want to fiddle with any more stuff. They really don't. But it is what it is. I mean, having that kind of stability in team location helps with TV rights. So for all those whinging, I'll move the team out. They're not very good. They're not drawing fans. Actually, for TV rights, they're probably doing pretty good for viewership. Stick them there. It's stability. It makes it easier to sell the product if you've got teams in locations. Just leave be. The league's making more money than it ever has. The players are making more money than they ever have, even with escrow. So we'll see what happens going forward. If there's movement on escrow to make it a 50-50 system, the players will take that. They will be more flexible on Olympic participation, revenue sharing, and other bits and pieces. Plus, the league obviously wants things from the players as well, like contract changes to bridge contracts and signing on bonuses. They might want to take away the signing on bonus. Again, more flexible if you get rid of escrow. The players will be more willing to discuss with the league if escrow goes. But both sides are coming from this going, we don't want to strike because Seattle, that means a chance for players who otherwise wouldn't play in the NHL. So AHL level players getting called up. Growth of the game. More AHL level players will want to, play in the NHL. They get their chance to, have a go in the NHL and show what they're capable of. More European players will get drafted. And it means growth of the game at lower levels as well. And if you have a lockout or a strike, it affects the growth at the lower levels of the game. It affects the AHL. It affects the ECHL. It will then affect the SPHL as well. The other professional league in North America that isn't actually affiliated to the NHL. It will affect them. It will affect the European leagues because NHL players want to come over here. And then it affects the funding. And it all FUBARs it completely. And FUBAR is a term, by the way. You can have it in Scrabble. It's now a word. It means something rude. It screws up everything. So neither side wants to go down that route because the last 3 lockouts have had an adverse effect on other leagues and the sport as a whole has had a knock-on effect in the seasons following. I think we're less likely to have it because they're having pre-opt-out discussions. They're going in regularly and being very vocal and having discussions and being more open about the discussions they're having, and they're going in more good faith than they have in previous years, but we'll see. I've talked a lot about the NHL possibility of a lockout. I've done videos on it. So if you're not sure what I'm blabbering on about, there are NHL videos of potential for lockout in the 2020 or 20 or 21. There's the potential. I've charted the history. Now with Seattle definitely being set for 2021, the lockout will be in 2020 if it is to happen. But before that, it'll probably be a player strike and it's probably going to be escrow. That's the issue. If the NHL wants to have flexibility with it and be more flexible to discuss escrow or even scrap escrow altogether, that's I think the sticking point is escrow. And I'm even sure that some owners don't even like it as well. So I don't think the ownership group as a whole is united over escrow, and I don't think the players fully, and are necessarily all of the players are fully clued up on how much of their wages get taken in escrow, because they've got so much money floating around they don't really notice they're missing 15% of their salary in escrow. But it is a sticking point. It also is a flexible system as well, and I think the players would rather that part of their contracts disappear. The NHL, I don't think there's an agreed ownership position on it, but there we go. And TV rights will have a big impact on the NHL avoiding a lockout and wanting to avoid it because of what's happened in previous years, and that lost revenue hurting the league and hurting certain markets, and other markets benefiting from it. I think there's a whole host of things going, but now nearly every market's making a profit. I think there's 3 markets that aren't making a profit, and I think there's 4 markets that are breaking even. So we've gone from the league's not making enough money, we're going out of business, to we can't lie saying we're not making any money anymore. We were sold before 2004. The league was bust, basically. We're losing money all over the place, and in reality, they weren't. So the owners have lost a little bit of trust there. Players didn't paint themselves with glory in the previous 3 lockouts either. But in this case, escrow, now that I've gone through and researched it, I understand why they're frustrated. And if that was relayed to the wider fan base and explained, the lower end players who are NHLPA affiliated, some of them are on 2-way contracts that aren't worth a lot of money. They get hammered with escrow, absolutely hammered. They are on not a lot of money for what they do. So I think if that was to come across to the wider fan base, there may be a solution found with the public pressure put upon the NHL and the NHLPA to come to an agreement, at least temporarily or semi-permanently, until the next batch of TV rights come up. But it is what it is. Anyway, any more questions? Okay, go back to names, jerseys, logos. The best branding in any sport. Well, until very recently, the biggest club for financial revenue was Manchester United. Now, I would say Barcelona, Real Madrid. You just look at when you just look at the Middle East, Africa, Asia. You look how many European jerseys they're wearing. That's some pretty good branding. The New York Yankees. How many people do you see walking around with New York Yankees gear on, be it T-shirts or hats? They're not baseball fans. It's a fashion symbol and has been for about 30 years. You could say the same with the LA Kings, the old Chevy style logo. My brother's not an ice hockey fan. I've taken him a few games. He's got an LA Kings hat from the 90s, retro hat. So there are some North American teams that are very well branded. I would say the Yankees and the LA Kings got some good branding. Partly because of pop culture, and you've got to look at certain TV sitcoms and dramas that are set in the US that are broadcast around the world, predominantly aimed at the European market, especially British and Irish market. The Yankees, the Detroit Red Wings, they come up in a lot of pop culture. The Red Wings, LA Kings, in the 90s with Wayne Gretzky, that became a big thing. That's North American sport. European sport, Barcelona, Real Madrid, and your Premier League clubs have got some pretty good branding. But at the same time, it's subjective. It is subjective, absolutely subjective. Success also breeds, good branding. If you're successful, you can flog your stuff. I would say the logo is the best logo in sport. For me, best logo in sport. I like the Canberra Raiders logo, but I'm a Raiders fan, so I'm biased there. But best logo in sport. Honestly, I couldn't tell you what the best logo in sport is. I think I do think that's a tough one. I really do. I don't think there's one overall logo that for me screams out best logo. I think it's subjective. And I think some of them are iconic for what they stand for. So the 3 lions on an England jersey, the Brazil Federation You know, some of those football logos of national teams, they transcend sport because you know what that is. You picture it. Club logos, there are some good ones, but again, it's subjective because what I think is different to what some other people think. Some club names, Newell's Old Boys, or in Argentina is a good one. Old Boys, Newell Old Boys. Boca Juniors, that's a good one. Juventud in Montevideo. It's basically another way of saying young boys in Spanish, similar to Juventus in Italian. I would say some of the Italian, like Atalanta, I think is the best name because Atalanta is a mythical figure of Greek Roman mythology. The team is in Bergamo, but Atalanta, she was one of Diana's muses, and she was a huntress in mythology. Atalanta, that's possibly but I like kind of classical history. So Atalanta in Italian football is a good one, but then you got Sparta Rotterdam and Ajax and Feyenoord, PSV. Dutch football's have got some pretty iconic historical names. German football, there's some names there. Schalke's a good one. I like Schalke, even though it's actually in Gelsenkirchen, but I like Schalke. Kaiserslautern, that's just a name that sends shivers up your spine, even though they're not a very good team. Hertha in Berlin. 1860 Munich. That's one. St. Pauli is a weird one because they've got a pirate logo, St. Pauli, but they're very politically orientated as left-wing thugs. So I'm not a big fan of St. Pauli as what the club is, but their logo is pretty cool. Their name's pretty cool. But no, for me, it's Atalanta for a sports name. Just Atalanta. Basically, a Greek huntress from mythology. That's pretty cool, and the logo is actually a Greek huntress from mythology as well. It's she had long flowing hair, and she was. That's a good one. Is Atalanta? That for me is a pretty good one. But then you've got Chievo Verona. Their logo of a Italian knight on horseback is pretty cool as well. Chievo. That's a pretty good one. Sampdoria, that's just a brilliant name, isn't it? Sampdoria, the Serie A of the 90s, Sampdoria, that's a brilliant name. Batistuta up front at one point, I think, when I was at Fiorentina. But no, Sampdoria is a good one. And then you got some other pretty epic sports branding as well, I would say. But I think logos is a difficult one. Jerseys are iconic. Peru's international jersey with the red stripe going across, that's iconic. And if you go online and look at footage of Peru in the 70s, from 1970 to 78 the World Cup, that jersey is iconic. That is an iconic jersey. You can never escape from that. It's just a beautiful jersey. That one of the most iconic, beautiful jerseys I think you'll ever see. Brazil 1970, that kit in 1970, again, it's the first football cup in colour. That is an iconic piece of sporting history. The Argentina 78 kit was better than the 86 kit, I have to admit. But you've got to look at some of the iconic kits of the era, really. The Italian kit of '82 is a pretty good one as well. That's an international football. Rugby, I would say the Springboks possibly have the best logo in rugby union. The Springbok, that's an iconic logo around the world. I'm not sold on the French kit at the moment. The French kit is Le Coq Sportif, and it's really not very good. The Italian, I like the Italian. I've got an Italian kit actually. There's my Italian Federation of Italian Rugby. There's my Italia. I knew I had that one somewhere, and I've got another one to hand. I've got my Blackburn kit. That's an iconic. That is iconic for me. but I'm a Blackburn fan, so of course I would say that. But that's one of the founders of the Football League. So that's a historical logo that's been around since 1875. So, but I thought I'd have them to hand. I knew I had them to hand. I know I've got some more. I've got more. Let me have a look. The current Winnipeg Jets. I'm not keen on that logo. I have to admit, I'm not a big fan of it. There's the Canberra Raiders in the NRL. There's a print-out version of the Blackburn logo that I did a magnet of. I did magnets once. I don't really use them much, but I have them. What else have I got? Let's get rid of that piece of crap. Let's get rid of that piece of crap. Oh, fuck off. Stupid bloody crap. Yeah. There's the old Bracknell Bees logo, which is hideous. Sarnia Sting, check them out. They're very similar. I don't like the new logo. This is an iconic logo if you follow ice hockey. The old Winnipeg Jets. I like that logo. They should bring that back permanently. I've got some other bits and pieces floating around, but there's some of the sports logos that I have to hand. We're talking about logos, names. Oh, look, Palmer had a brilliant kit. It's just a pity that the club was run by absolute muppets, really. That's what killed Palmer, wasn't their kit or their logo or their branding. It was the people who owned the team. I still like Atalanta, just for the logo. Udinese, they have a different type of striping to Juventus. Siena had a good kit and logo, but of course they went bust because of corruption. AC Milan's kit is synonymous with black and red. It's just and white shorts. That's a synonymous kit with the Champions League in the 90s and Serie A in the 90s. Napoli's kit of the late 80s, early 90s, synonymous. Diego Maradona. That was just some beautiful kit there. AS Monaco, they've got a interesting kit. The kits were pretty cool at the time. Saint Etienne had a good kit, and Auxerre had a pretty cool kit when Djibril Cissé in the early 2000s was playing for them. Auxerre's kit was pretty cool. And then you got to look at Villarreal, the bright yellow. That's iconic. Deportivo La Coruña have a pretty good kit. Real Betis, green and white. That's a rare colour scheme. Galatasaray, the dark red and the gold. You cannot deny Galatasaray have an epic kit. Cannot deny Galatasaray's kit is epic. The club are vile, but the kit's pretty nice. Besiktas, they black and white stripes, iconic really. But I think Atalanta for a logo and for a kit, Chievo. Yeah, they've got a kit. But I also like Bari's kit of the 90s as well, so I can't really comment. And Lecce had a good kit going back in the 90s as well, so I can't really comment too much on kits because I have a few favourites of more obscure teams that many people don't know about. I think Roma and Lazio, I think Roma's kit is just that's the city's colours, is that dark red and gold. I've been to Rome and that is the city's colours, is Roma's kit. That's a link with the community and that's a beautiful kit, absolutely beautiful kit. Lazio, the issues with Lazio is they've got links to fascism, and I'm not hiding it there. That's the fascist colours, and I'm not hiding it. The logo has got fascist connotations. It's a shame because Lazio have a brilliant kit, but the logo and the history of the club is linked to Mussolini and fascism, and it's just horrible to think that. But Lazio have got a brilliant kit though. But I have to admit, Atalanta have got the best logo, and Chievo have the best kit for me. I like Bari's logo because it's the chicken. It's a simple cockerel, and their stadium is stunning in Bari. It's a beautiful stadium built for the Italian '90 World Cup, and Bari had a good team back in the day, and their logo is pretty cool. I have to admit, Bari have got a pretty crazy logo. It's crazy because it looks like it's been designed by a 5-year-old, but actually it works for what the team is historically. Palermo pink kit for Palermo. Bright pink kit. That's mad. But then you got Cagliari have a brilliant kit and logo as well. I love Italian football. Stop. I've watched a lot of Italian football as a kid, so I Empoli have a pretty good kit as well. Not gonna lie, Empoli's kit's pretty cool. But it is what it is. I'm not keen on Juventus's new logo. Not keen on that, and I don't think my cousin and my uncle are either because they're Juventus fans. I'm not sure they're keen on the Juventus logo being the weird J. Don't think I'm keen on it. I don't think a lot of people are keen on it. I think it looks a little bit naff, to be honest, bit naff. But then you got to look at like teams like Benfica and their kit and their logo and and there's the history behind that. Porto, Sporting, Braga, they've got some pretty good kits. I like Porto's kit. Never gonna lie, not gonna lie. It's very similar to Reading's kit, blue and white hoops. I like Porto's kit. But then you've got like some obscure teams like Bordeaux. They've got a pretty slick kit. James Richardson, he's still going as well. No, look, James Richardson. That was my Saturday and Sunday mornings between September and May were sorted because I had a bald bloke with a goatee with a pink newspaper, the Gazzetta dello Sport, covering Italian football. That was my weekend sorted. We don't have that anymore. James Richardson, yeah, Football Italia was brilliant. The Saturday show and the Sunday show, they were absolutely brilliant. I miss them. I miss Italia, Football Italia. I do. They should bring that back. Personally, they should bring that back. But we now have the La Liga on ITV4, and their coverage is naff, absolutely naff. I can't stand the Liga's coverage. It's just ugh. But it is what it is. I'm just trying to think of some other pretty. FC Copenhagen's kit's quite nice. Their logo's pretty cool. If you want to talk about logos and kits, jerseys. Well, names not so much. I think names is James Richardson. No, he wasn't. No, that was Free Sports. They did that. James Richardson had nothing to do with the Hockey World Championships, unless it's field hockey. I don't think he did ice hockey. That was the Free Sports team, which are both Canadian. But James Richardson, I think he still covers Italian football. I think that's his job, is an Italian football pundit. He basically covers it for the British media. So anytime there's a breaking transfer news, it's James Richardson is the guy unearthing what is happening in Italy. It's a shame they don't have Italian Serie A coverage, but the league itself has got issues. There's corruption issues constantly, and it's soured things a little bit because as a kid growing up, I used to love watching it, and I could name players and teams that now I don't even know half the I don't know half the players anymore, and that's the problem. Is the league is not what it once was. The quality of player isn't what it once was, and it is what it is. We've gone full circle. It will be cyclical. It will come back, and the Premier League won't always be the top league in Europe, and it will become cyclical, and then we'll see what happens in 5, 10, 15 years' time. But at the moment, Italian football's in a bit of a mess. But we move on. We digress. We move on. But some of the teams in Italian football, some of the kits and the teams, and I mean, I can remember when George Weah scored that goal against Chievo in the San Siro in 96, 97. You went the length of the pitch. I remember that. That was on Italia. That was the live game that weekend on the Sunday. Brilliant goal by George Weah. Brilliant. But it is what it is, and I mean the quality level it evolves. This is why NRL is better than Super League right now. It wasn't always the case. The Premier League wasn't always the top league in Europe, and now it is. It's a revolving cyclical thing. I mean, the Premier League isn't always going to be on the top ladder, and hasn't always been. And it shouldn't be. It's what drives other leagues to get better, but it is what it is, and one day Serie A might get back to the pinnacle. We shall see. But it helps if another team other than Juventus wins Serie A. I think if another team got on the top rung, might actually help Serie A get back to the heady heights it had 10, 15, 20 years ago. But it is what it is. We move on. But my youth was spent watching Football Italia on a weekend, Saturday. The Saturday wrap-up show and the Sunday live game, that was my weekend. And I miss it massively, but it is what it is. And James Richardson was my weekend. He was my weekend. I forget who his co-commentator was, but he made my weekend. I would wait all weekend for that over other sport. Oh, notification. Something's happened. What's happened? Nothing interesting at all has happened. But I totally agree that we had a European league on a main channel getting coverage. Now La Liga is on a minor channel. ITV4 isn't the same as ITV, and it's not in the same way. And we've had the Bundesliga highlights; they're not on ITV4 anymore. So it's interesting to see how overseas coverage is sold and who buys the rights and the state of a league. And I mean, they used to have the French highlights on Channel 4 as well about 10, 15 years ago. The League One highlights aren't there anymore. And some of the logos in French were like Ajaccio with the Moor's head, and Cagliari in Italian with the Moor's head. I mean, yeah, that's an iconic logo for what it means culturally for those people. Marseille's got a historical logo. PSG, the Eiffel Tower, naff off. PSG, that logo means greed to me. That logo means greed. I don't like Man City's new logo. I like their old logo from their Main Road. I don't like the new logo of Man City. I don't like Arsenal. Iconic, Tottenham iconic for what they are. But some of these logo redesigns I'm not a big fan of. But it is what it is. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there because I've blabbed on for nearly 3 hours now. I wasn't expecting to go this long, but I've got some time to kill. I've got some bits and pieces to do. And then I'll be watching the England Cameroon game, and then France are playing Brazil, which is the big game. That is a big game. I'll be watching that. And hopefully VAR doesn't come to dominate the discussion of the rest of this Women's World Cup, because for all those people slagging off the women's game, the things happening right now are of consequence to the men's game going forward from next season, from the start of the Premier League, Football League season here in England to the Champions League, Europa League, and then Euro 2020 next summer. What is happening right now at this Women's World Cup is going to have consequences for the men's game. And for all these people who go, I don't care what happens, it's having a massive consequence. So for those football fans who are slagging off the women's game, beware, because what's happening right now is going to affect the men's game for the next 5-10 years. But there we go. I'm going to leave that there. Thank you for all the questions. Really appreciate it. That was a good 3 hours of my life. Well spent. I will have, obviously, match reviews for you. If anything else happens in the meantime, I'll be sure to cover it. So for now, thank you very much for watching, and I'll have some more videos for you very soon.